Chapter 45-47. The leader of the group of people behind him was a young child with a malicious look in his eyes. The moment he saw the child, Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. Zhuowen was no stranger to this child. It was the Ice Ghost King's ghost child, who had targeted him many times. However, Zhuowen's eyes did not linger on the ghost child. Instead, he stared straight at the young man beside the ghost child. He had a head of bright golden hair, and his skin was crystal clear. He looked like an immortal who had descended to the mortal world. The strangest thing was that there was a golden vertical eye between his eyebrows. Sakyamuni. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said word by word. Sakyamuni glanced at Zhuowen from the corner of his eyes, and his lips curled into a proud smile. Long time no see. You've disappointed me. Sakyamuni's tone was indifferent. It was as if a superior was speaking to a subordinate. He did not take Zhuowen seriously at all. Although Sakyamuni had lost to Zhuowen back then, he had almost died. However, so many years had passed, and Sakyamuni was no longer who he used to be. His improvement was too fast. He was like a rising comet that was unstoppable. He had trampled most of the younger generation of the 100 domains under his feet. Now, Zhuowen's aura was only at the pinnacle of the cosmic Dharma stage. This level of cultivation was not worth mentioning in Sakyamuni's eyes. Even though Zhuowen had killed Xing Hangshu, Sakyamuni still did not take Zhuowen seriously. This was because if Sakyamuni wanted to kill Xing Hangshu, it would be as easy as killing an ant. In his eyes, Zhuowen was just an ant that was slightly stronger than Xing Hangshu. It would be easy for him to kill Zhuowen if he wanted to. As someone who lost to me back then, what right do you have to be disappointed in me? Zhuowen laughed coldly and said indifferently. Hearing this, Sakyamuni's face turned cold. An ant will always be an ant. Back then, you could only say that you were lucky. But now, relying on luck won't be of much use. Sakyamuni said arrogantly. That's all you have to say. That's enough bullshit. Can you get lost now? Zhuowen said rudely. Sakyamuni's face turned ugly. Zhuowen's words were really vicious. Pfft. At this moment, a burst of laughter came from another direction. Guan Yihan and Ghost Child, who had been confronting each other, couldn't help but look to the east. He saw another group of people walking towards them. The leader of this team was a tall woman in a purple robe. This woman wore a purple gold crown on her head. Her entire body was shining like the most dazzling star in the night sky. She was the one who had let out the pleasant laughter earlier. King of the Amethyst, King of Amethyst. Guan Yihan, Ghost King, and Ghost Child's eyes focused on the purple-clothed woman. They frowned at the same time. Ziyixuan walked near the entrance. Her sparkling eyes scanned the two groups in front of her. Then, her gaze fell on Zhuowen. You're just a little rogue cultivator. Your strength is not much. Your tone is not small. Sakyamuni is the sage master's disciple. He's not a coward. You provoke him like this. Do you really think he doesn't have a temper? Ziyixuan's beautiful eyes showed interest. Then, she covered her cherry lips and giggled again. Zhuowen glanced at Ziyixuan and sneered in his heart. This woman wanted to see the world in chaos. The relationship between the two sides was already tense enough. Her laughter made the originally tense relationship between the two sides even more subtle. Whether I have strength or not, you will only know if you come to my bed. It's too early for you to jump to conclusions. Zhuowen retorted bluntly. This woman had sinister intentions. Naturally, he would not be merciful with his words. Sure enough, when Zhuowen said that, Ziyixuan's beautiful face changed slightly. What an arrogant brat! You have to pay the price for shooting your mouth off. Ziyixuan's beautiful eyes were filled with frost. With a flick of her finger, a purple energy shot out like a bolt of purple lightning. It was aimed at the center of Zhuowen's eyebrows. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. This Ziyixuan was really domineering. He had merely retorted, yet he had actually attacked him. Wasn't this a little too much? Bang! Guanihan slapped out with his right palm and dispersed the purple energy that was aimed at Zhuowen. Ziyixuan, what do you mean by this? Zhuo Xiaoyu is my friend. Don't you think it's too much to attack my friend in front of me? Guanihan said indifferently. Ziyixuan said coldly, Guanihan, your friend is too outspoken. I'm just teaching him a lesson for you. Then you don't have to worry about it. Guanihan said indifferently. Ziyixuan's beautiful face changed slightly. After looking deeply at Guanihan, she suddenly giggled. I was just joking with this little brother. When the ruins open, we might meet again. Let's get along well. Ziyixuan giggled and led the experts of the Purple Chestnut Imperial Court into the extraterritorial battlefield. Soon, they disappeared from everyone's sight. You have to be careful of Ziyixuan. She's not a woman to be trifled with. Moreover, she's very vengeful. Old man Anshi helplessly reminded Zhuowen. Zhuowen shrugged and did not speak. However, a cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Zhuowen, I hope your luck is good enough to survive the demonic corpse cliff. If you die in the demonic corpse cliff, then I won't be able to kill you with my own hands. Sakyamuni glanced at Zhuowen and entered the extraterritorial battlefield with the ghost child. Su Jiaying and Mi Haomiao, who were following behind the ghost child, did not dare to look directly at Guanihan and left with their tails between their legs. As people of the Void Yama realm, the two of them had colluded with the ghost child. Naturally, they did not have the face to face Guanihan. Let's go. After the Bauhinia king and the ghost child left, Guanihan spoke. Thus, the king of hell and his group left the encampment and entered the vast extraterritorial battlefield. The demonic corpse cliff was an extremely dangerous place in the extraterritorial battlefield. Its location was very remote, located in the northwest of the battlefield. After about half a day, the king of hell and his group arrived at the periphery of the demonic corpse cliff. Around the demonic corpse cliff was a vast and boundless black forest. The trees in the black forest did not have any leaves. Instead, they had withered branches. At a glance, they looked like withered corpses standing there. Moreover, it was not just one tree that was like this. The entire black forest was like this, giving off a gloomy feeling. In the center of the black forest, a huge cliff rose up and stood in front of everyone's eyes. This cliff was surrounded by a thick black fog. The black fog was extremely strange. It had the ability to naturally block divine sense and vision. When Zhuowen arrived at the periphery of the black forest and tried to use his divine sense to spy on the inside of the cliff, it was blocked by the black fog. At the periphery of the black forest, streaks of light flashed past like a meteor shower, dazzling and resplendent. Those streaks of light were cultivators from all over. They had come for the ruins of the demonic corpse cliff. Chapter 45-48. This is the demonic corpse cliff. After entering this dangerous place, you must be extremely careful. Guanihan reminded them in a low voice. Zhuowen looked at Duan Jipeng, Li Ying, and Li Shu'a and said in a deep voice, Brother Duan, the three of you enter my macro world first. Stay with Ziyang and Luoya. After entering the ruins, I will let you out. Ziyang and Luoya had followed Zhuowen on this trip. However, the two of them had been staying in Zhuowen's macro world and had never shown their faces. Zhuowen was also worried that the demonic corpse cliff was too strange. Duan Jipeng and the other two were the weakest. If they were caught, it would be troublesome. Young Master Zhua, there is no need to trouble you with Li Ying and Li Shu'a. I will let them enter my law embodiment of heaven and earth. Li Yinglong said with a smile. Li Ying and Li Shu'a were members of the Su Ming family. As the head of the family, he naturally had the obligation to protect them. If he had to trouble Zhuowen with this, Li Yinglong would naturally feel guilty in his heart. Zhuowen nodded. He glanced at Duan Jipeng. After seeing the latter nod in agreement, he put Duan Jipeng into his macro world. Li Yinglong put Li Ying and Li Shu'a into his law embodiment of heaven and earth. After doing this, they stepped into the black forest and walked toward the demonic corpse cliff in the center. Everyone, be careful. The black fog lingering around the demonic corpse cliff is the corpse chi condensed from the corpses of countless experts who have fallen here. After countless years of accumulation and change, this corpse chi has an extremely terrifying corrosive and violent poison. When they reached the periphery of the demonic corpse cliff, Guan Yihan stopped and reminded them with a solemn expression. After saying this, powerful divine power erupted from his body. Dazzling golden divine power covered his entire body, forming an indestructible film. The King of Hell and the others did the same and used their divine power to protect their surroundings. Zhuowen, Elder Anshi, and Li Yinglong followed suit. Zhuowen's body was enveloped in purple-gold divine power as he slowly stepped into the black fog. Ci. As soon as he entered the black fog, the divine power covering his body came into contact with the black fog and immediately gave off a concentrated sizzling sound. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. This black fog indeed possessed an extremely powerful corrosive power. He could clearly feel that the divine power covering his body was being corroded away. If he hadn't been constantly circulating his divine power to replenish the consumed divine power on the surface of his body, he would have been corroded by the black mist in less than half an incense stick's time. The deeper he went, the stronger the corrosive power of the black fog became. The speed at which it corroded Zhuowen's divine power also increased. Zhuowen had no choice but to continuously circulate his divine power to replenish the depleted divine power membrane on the surface of his body. Roar! Suddenly, Zhuowen heard a shocking roar. This roar was very far away at first, but in the next moment it suddenly appeared behind Zhuowen. It was as if there was a giant beast crouching behind him, ready to give him a fatal blow. However, Zhuowen was very cautious. He did not immediately turn around. Instead, he looked at the King of Hell and his men. Attention! Do not turn back. This black fog has the side effect of confusing the mind. Once you turn back, you will be in danger. Guan Yihan, who was walking at the front of the group, suddenly spoke and warned in a serious tone. However, just as Guan Yihan finished speaking, a middle-aged man in the King of Hell's group seemed to have encountered the same situation as Zhuowen and instinctively turned his head. There was a trace of doubt on his face, and he happened to look in Zhuowen's direction. In an instant, the middle-aged man's expression changed from doubt to horror and fear, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. No. Don't! The middle-aged man shouted loudly. He actually left the group and ran toward the left side of the black fog. In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged man's figure disappeared from everyone's sight. Zhou Yong. In the group, the pretty face of a female practitioner changed slightly. Just as she was about to chase after him, she was stopped by Guan Yihan. King. Zhou Yong, the female practitioner said anxiously. Guan Yihan's gaze was deep as he said. He turned back and looked. His mind is completely confused. He can't be saved anymore. Hearing that, the female practitioner's face changed slightly. Just as she was about to say something, she heard Zhou Yong's shrill scream coming from the left side of the black fog. This scream was too miserable. It came continuously from the depths of the black fog, and it was heart-wrenching. Let's go. After Guan Yihan finished speaking, he continued to lead the way at the front. The female practitioner, who was originally worried about Zhou Yong, lowered her head and silently followed the group. Zhuowen's eyes gradually narrowed and his heart sank. This demonic corpse cliff was indeed strange. If one was not careful, it was easy to fall into danger. The middle-aged man, Zhou Yong, was the best example. Zhuowen continued forward. However, what made him anxious was that the roar behind him was getting closer and closer. It was even closer than before. It was as if the roaring exotic beast was lying on top of him, roaring into his ears, making him restless and impatient. Zhuowen took a deep breath and secretly channeled the primordial technique, to stabilize his mind. Only then did he manage to keep up with the group. After about 2 hours, the group finally left the black fog and arrived at the entrance of the demonic corpse cliff. The entrance of the demonic corpse cliff was a swamp where not even a blade of grass grew. On both sides of the swamp were 2 rows of huge cliffs that surrounded the swamp. The surface of the 2 rows of cliffs was covered with white bones, and there were skulls neatly arranged at the top of the cliffs. The huge eyes of the skulls were empty and looked at the bottom of the cliff as if they were looking directly at the group of people at the bottom. The swamp was suffused with a strange green color and constantly emitted horrifying green bubbles. At the end of the swamp stood 2 gigantic bone pillars. The 2 bone pillars were formed by crushing countless bones into a ball and blending them into the shape of a pillar. This swamp has a more terrifying toxicity than the black fog. It's enough to poison a cultivator of the cosmic Dharma plane to death in an instant. Even if it's an expert of the cosmic Dharma plane, his life will be in danger if he's poisoned. The many skeletons on both sides of the cliff are also some kind of mechanism. Once an outsider steps into the swamp, they will immediately wake up and attack unscrupulously. Guan turned to face the group and continued, "I can deal with the poison in the swamp. However, I'm afraid we'll have to work together to get through the mechanisms on both sides of the cliff." Everyone nodded. Next, Guan took out some black elixirs with golden patterns and handed them to everyone present. This is the detoxification elixir at the peak of the 3rd tier of the eternal level. Take this detoxification elixir and the poison in the swamp will not harm us for the time it takes to burn an incense stick. After receiving the detoxification elixir, the people of the King of Hell took it without hesitation. After careful observation, Zhuowen found that there was no problem with the detoxification elixir. He nodded to Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong and took the lead in swallowing it. After everyone had taken the detoxification elixir, Guan took the lead and stepped into the swamp. The rest of the people also followed suit one after another. The moment everyone entered the swamp, the cliffs on both sides suddenly made a strange creaking sound. This sound was like some kind of bone breaking, which was very uncomfortable to hear. On both sides of the cliffs, the piles of bones also moved. In the depths of the empty eyes of the skulls, wisps of strange green ghost fire ignited. Chapter 45-49. Crack, crack, crack. A strange sound echoed on both sides of the cliff. The piles of bones on both sides of the cliff seemed to have come to life. They stood up and rushed toward the people in the swamp. These skeletons were of different shapes and sizes. Some were tall and burly, some were short and strong. There were even skeletons of various beasts that ran as if they were flying. A group of skeletons was like a white torrent. They quickly fell toward the swamp in the middle of the cliff and collided with the people in the swamp in the blink of an eye. Guan snorted. He waved his sleeve and took out a scroll. The scroll floated above everyone's heads, releasing a purple energy that poured out like a waterfall, surrounding everyone and forming a solid semicircular barrier. Bang! 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 Numerous skeletons collided with the purple barrier like a torrent. However, they could not cause any damage to the barrier. On the other hand, these white bones, due to the terrifying impact, shattered into countless white powder and scattered all over the ground. However, after these skeletons were shattered, they reformed on the spot and formed new skeletons that continued to attack the purple barrier. These skeletons are cursed by the demonic corpse cliff. As long as the curse is not broken, these skeletons will never be destroyed. Guan said indifferently and continued to walk toward the depths of the swamp. The rest of the people quickly followed. Zhuowen followed behind silently. Looking at the endless skeletons outside, he was deep in thought. The demonic corpse cliff was indeed strange. The so-called curse was so powerful that it could drive the skeletons to continue to fight. Moreover, this was only the periphery. What about the innermost part of the demonic corpse cliff? Wouldn't it be even more dangerous? When the group reached the end of the swamp, the torrent of skeletons seemed to be afraid of something and retreated. What appeared in front of them were two huge bone pillars. There were many skeletons on the surface of the bone pillars. It looked as if they were forcefully mixed together. There were broken hand bones, leg bones, and round skulls. A strange white mist lingered around the bone pillar, giving people a gloomy feeling and chills all over their bodies. Don't touch the white mist on the surface of the bone pillars. That's the chi of death, formed by the resentment of the many corpses in the demonic corpse cliff. Guanihan said in a low voice and stepped into the world behind the bone pillar. Everyone kept Guanihan's words in mind. They carefully passed through the bone pillars and tried their best to avoid touching the death chi around the bone pillars. After passing through the bone pillars, what appeared before everyone was a vast and boundless wilderness. The surface of the wilderness was shrouded in a faint gray fog, obscuring their vision. In the far distance of the wilderness, there was a faintly discernible cliff. Zhuoxiaoyu, we've already entered the demonic corpse cliff. Where should we go next? Guanihan stopped and turned to look at Zhuowen. Only the owner of the map knew the exact location of the ruins. Guanihan naturally didn't know. Zhuowen nodded and took out the map fragment from his bosom. The map fragment flashed with golden light. The golden light suddenly shot out and turned into a thin golden line, extending in the northwest direction. The ruins should be in the northwest direction of the demonic corpse cliff, Zhuowen said in a low voice. Guanihan's face changed drastically and became gloomy. Senior Guan, is there a problem? Zhuowen observed Guanihan's expression and immediately saw the abnormality on his face. Zhuoxiaoyu, you may not know. Although there are many dangers in the demonic corpse cliff, there are countless evil spirits and ghosts. There are even many resurrected corpses, but these are not the most dangerous ones. At this point, Guanihan's expression became extremely serious. Zhuowen was stunned and his eyes became serious. He could see a trace of fear in Guanihan's eyes. Yes, it was fear. And to be able to make a powerhouse of Guanihan's level feel fear, what kind of terror was it? What is it? Zhuowen couldn't help but ask. It's the curse. It's a curse that's always there. Guanihan said with a hint of fear in his eyes. Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly, but he was a little puzzled. It wasn't the first time Guanihan had mentioned the curse to him. Back in the swamp, he had said that the resurrected corpses were cursed by the demonic corpse cliff. But in Zhuowen's eyes, the curse in the swamp wasn't that strong. Guanihan seemed to see the puzzlement in Zhuowen's eyes and continued, "There's a curse in the demonic corpse cliff all the time, even the place we're in is the same. But the curse isn't evenly distributed. The place we're in now is the place where the power of the curse is the weakest. Under the protection of my scroll, we're not affected." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said, "Senior, you mean that the northwest region of the demonic corpse cliff is the place where the power of the curse is the strongest?" Guanihan nodded and said, "That's right. In that place, no matter what strange things happened, they would happen one after another. Many powerhouses with the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth went missing in the northwest region. It's very dangerous there." "I've heard about this too. The northwest region of the demonic corpse cliff is a forbidden area. You can't enter it casually," Elder Anshi also said in a low voice. Suddenly, dense footsteps came from the left side of the gray fog. In an instant, Guanihan, Zhuowen, and the rest became alert and stared at the left side. When the footsteps were very close, a group of people appeared in front of them. There weren't many people in this group. There were only 5 of them, and the leader was an old man with white hair and a beard. Guanihan's eyes flickered when he saw the old man. He said, "Old man Gong?" The old man also saw Guanihan and the rest. His gaze fell on Guanihan and revealed a trace of joy. "Brother Guan, what a coincidence! I actually met you at the demonic corpse cliff." The old man walked up with a smile, his face full of enthusiasm. Guan subconsciously took a few steps back and stretched out his right hand. Wait a moment. The old man stopped in his tracks and said awkwardly, Brother Guan, what's our relationship? Why are you being so formal? Guan snorted coldly. I have nothing to do with you. You deliberately waited for me near the entrance, didn't you? The old man smiled and rubbed his hands. You even saw through that. As expected of Brother Guan. As he spoke, the old man's gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was beside Guan, and the smile on his face grew wider. I think this must be little brother Zhuowen. I've heard some of your deeds. Now that I see it, you're really extraordinary. The old man with the surname Gong praised Zhuowen, and the smile on his face became more and more amiable. Zhuowen felt a little strange. What was wrong with this old man? He didn't know him at all. Why was the old man smiling so eagerly at him? Zhuo Xiaoyu, this is the Dark Thunder King Gong Xuekuan. He's the ruler of the Dark Thunder Realm. Elder Anqi introduced him to Zhuowen in a low voice. Zhuowen was startled and immediately nodded. The Dark Thunder Realm was ranked 7th among the 9 major realms. It was considered a relatively weak realm among the 9 major realms. Chapter 45-50. Old Man Gong, why are you purposely waiting for us here? Guan asked calmly. Gong Xuekuan smiled. There are too many strong people entering the ruins this time. The competition is too fierce. I took the initiative to come here to help you. Guan sneered. Helping us is a lie. I think you're here for the quota. Gong Xuekuan could only shrug his shoulders when he saw that his purpose was exposed. He smiled bitterly and said, Brother Guan, since you already know, just give me a chance. I got the news too late this time. The quotas of the other owners of the map have either been snatched away or rejected me. You're my only hope now. Gong Xuekuan looked at Zhuowen. His smile became kinder, and there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Guan looked at Zhuowen thoughtfully. Zhuo Xiaoyu, the map fragment is in your hands. It's up to you to decide. Although Old Man Gong is not very reliable sometimes, he's still very trustworthy. There's strength in numbers. Welcome, Senior Gong, Zhuowen said with a smile. The demonic corpse cliff was too dangerous. The more strong people there were, the better it would be for their team. Zhuowen would not reject Gong Xuekuan and the others. Haha. Zhuo Xiaoyu is so forthright, Gong Xuekuan said happily. Old Man Gong, don't be happy too early. The location of the ruins is not a good place. Guan said calmly. Where? Gong Xuekuan asked in surprise. The northwest area of the demonic corpse cliff. Elder Anqi said in a low voice. Gong Xuekuan's pupils shrank and he frowned. It's actually there. That's a real horror. So I hope you'd be mentally prepared. Guan said seriously. Gong Xuekuan hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, Wealth comes from danger. I'll go with you. Although the curse power there is strange, as long as we're careful, there shouldn't be any problems. Guan nodded and continued. It's good that you're mentally prepared. How about this? I'll lead the way at the front and you'll bring up the rear. Ensure the safety of the rest of the team. Gong Xuekuan nodded and did not object to Guan arrangement. Next, the group began to move towards the northwest. Along the way they encountered all kinds of ghosts, evil spirits, and skeletons. As soon as these ghosts, evil spirits, and skeletons saw them, they launched extremely fierce attacks, almost as if they didn't care about their lives. Luckily, Guan scroll was quite extraordinary. The barrier it emitted was extremely sturdy, blocking the attacks of the phantoms, evil spirits, and skeletons. However, as they went deeper into the northwest region, the number of ghosts, evil spirits, and skeletons increased exponentially, and they became stronger and stronger. Zhuowen was in the middle of the scroll barrier. He could clearly feel that the barrier around him was on the verge of collapse. It was becoming increasingly unstable. Woo woo woo. The surrounding gray fog became thicker and thicker, and a series of strange whistling sounds resounded, like the sharp cries of a baby. Everyone, be on your guard. We've entered the northwest region. Guan Yihan walked at the front of the team. His expression became extremely solemn as he reminded the people behind him. Everyone in the team became nervous. They followed Guan Yihan while vigilantly looking at the situation around them. They saw that on the surface of the barrier, one after another, hideous and terrifying faces appeared. The faces were densely packed and occupied the entire surface of the barrier. There was not a single gap. These ghosts are at least at the formation level, and many of them are even at the columnar level. They're not weaker than Ni Gu Xingguang. There are so many of them. In the team, someone looked at the dense phantoms on the barrier with a pale face and said with a trembling voice. Zhuowen's face was also a little gloomy. The demonic corpse cliff was indeed a famous perilous place in the extraterritorial battlefield. There were so many ghosts at the columnar level. If Ni Gu Xingguang cultivators were to appear here alone, they would not be able to hold on for long before they were torn to pieces by these ghosts. Bang bang bang! Terrifying sounds of collisions came from the scroll barrier. The surrounding ghosts attacked the scroll without any regard for their lives, causing the scroll to emit dense explosive sounds as if it would collapse at any time. Brother Guan, our vision is completely blocked by these ghosts. We can't even identify the direction. What should we do? Gong Xuekuan, who was at the back of the team, said with an ugly expression. Not only did the ghosts block their vision, but they also blocked their divine telekinesis. Their divine telekinesis could not identify the direction of the ruins at all. Someone needs to lead the way. Guan Yihan looked at Gong Xuekuan behind him and said, Old man Gong, you control the scroll. I'll lead the way. The King of Hell's team was shocked, especially the Gold Lord, Water Lord, and Fire Lord. Their expressions were filled with worry. Brother Guan, are you sure you want to do this? Gong Xuekuan was also a little surprised. He did not expect Guan Yihan to decide to lead the way himself. I'm the most powerful person in the team. I'm the most suitable person to lead the way. Guan Yihan was a decisive person. After handing over control of the scroll to Gong Xuekuan, he stepped out of the barrier and rushed into the area filled with ghosts. In the instant that Guan Yihan stepped out, he immediately attracted the attention of most of the ghosts. The ghosts let out ferocious roars and left the barrier, greedily pouncing toward Guan Yihan. Guan Yihan snorted coldly. A violent aura was released from his body, and a scorching golden light radiated from his body. With every step he took, his body grew 1,000,000 feet taller. The golden light around his body became more and more dazzling. After just 10 steps, his body grew 1,000,000 feet taller. His entire appearance had also changed. He had transformed into a 3-headed, 6-armed monster. The 3 heads did not look like human heads. Instead, they looked more like the heads of some kind of mutant beast. All of them had their eyes closed, and their expressions were all different. Follow me. Guan Yihan's booming voice traveled over. He stomped his right foot, and golden flames erupted from his 1,000,000 feet tall body. In the blink of an eye, the area within a radius of several thousand kilometers had been transformed into a terrifying sea of golden flames. All of the ghosts that attacked Guan Yihan were burned to ashes by the golden flames. Sizzling sounds of burning could be heard in the air. Guan Yihan took a light step forward. With a punch and a kick, she killed a large number of ghosts. He was like an unstoppable god, paving the way in front. Meanwhile, Zhuowen and the others followed in silence. So powerful! Zhuowen looked at the 1,000,000 feet tall lawful embodiment of heaven and earth in front of him. He was completely stunned. Guan Yihan was indeed a late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth cultivator. After displaying the true face of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, his strength and aura were far more powerful than Mi Haomiao and Su Jiaying. This was the huge difference between a late-stage and early-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Look, what is that? Suddenly, Gong Shuekuan, who had been following at the back, stopped in his tracks and looked forward with a grim expression. Everyone followed Gong Shuekuan's gaze and looked forward. In the depths of the gray fog ahead, an incomparably huge figure was slowly walking toward them. Chapter 45-51. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying footsteps could be heard coming from the front. It was as if an unprecedented earthquake was happening on the ground. Within the scroll barrier, everyone was trembling in fear and their breathing became rapid. An indescribable sense of fear was born in everyone's hearts, making them feel as if they were suffocating. Guanihan, who had been leading the way, stopped in his tracks. His eyes were serious as he looked at the huge figure walking out from the depths of the gray fog. The figure walked very slowly, but the aura it emitted was extremely terrifying. When the huge figure came closer, everyone finally saw the true face of the huge figure. The huge figure was also 1,000,000 feet tall and looked like a newborn baby. It had a huge head and a huge body, and its body was full of baby fat. However, the face of the huge baby was not cute at all. Its eyes were extremely black and its face had a strange greenish-black color. When it opened its mouth, it revealed sharp and cold fangs. What was even stranger was that the giant baby's entire body was covered in strange heads. The heads were all over the huge baby's body like sarcomas. It was disgusting to look at. "What is that?" someone in the team exclaimed, his face full of fear. The aura emitted by the huge baby was too terrifying. It was probably not weaker than an ordinary powerhouse of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. This is a pre-stage ghost. Its strength should be around the beginner stage of the pre-stage, which corresponds to the beginner stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The Gold Lord's expression was solemn as he frowned and spoke slowly. "It's actually a pre-stage ghost." Zhuo Wen's pupils constricted as a grave expression appeared in his eyes. A pre-stage ghost was equivalent to a powerhouse of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The energy it contained was exceptionally terrifying. Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered. If he refined the pre-stage ghost and borrowed its surging energy, he might be able to break through to the inverse ancient starlight level in one go. However, he was very clear that the pre-stage ghost was too strong. Guanihan was indeed very strong, but he might not be able to completely eliminate the pre-stage ghost. After all, the ghosts were too strange, and it was very difficult to completely kill them with normal method. Just now, Guanihan had cleared the way in front and seemed to have easily dispersed the evil spirits and ghosts at the array level. In fact, Zhuo knew that the evil spirits and ghosts had not been completely destroyed. They had only been scattered. After a while, the scattered evil spirits and ghosts would reform and become immortal and indestructible. Kaki. The giant infant let out an eerie laugh as its huge body slowly walked towards Guanihan. "This ghost is very slow. We don't need to fight it head-on. Let's go around it." Guanihan shouted and led everyone to the other side, trying to bypass the giant baby. Bang bang bang! However, when Guanihan bypassed the giant baby, another huge shadow appeared in the direction he had avoided. Taking a closer look, it was actually another 1,000,000 feet tall nascent soul. This giant infant was slightly different from the previous one. Its entire body was grayish-black, and its body was more muscular. Its face was also more ferocious. What? 2 pre-grade ghosts? Inside the scroll, everyone turned pale with fright. The fear in their eyes became even more intense. The sudden appearance of 2 pre-rank specters was beyond their expectations. "Let's go." Guanihan's face darkened as he turned around and headed in another direction. But soon, Guanihan stopped in his tracks. In other directions, there were also giant infants of different shapes and sizes. There was a total of 5 giant infants, and they were in 5 different directions, completely surrounding Guan Yihan and the rest. They slowly gathered together with eerie smiles on their faces as though they were mocking their stupidity. 3 sovereigns stepped forward. Each of you will be responsible for 1 ghost. After I've dealt with 1 ghost, I'll come to assist you. Guan Yihan turned to look at the Gold Sovereign, Water Sovereign, and Fire Sovereign in the scroll as his thunderous voice filled the area. The Gold Sovereign, Water Sovereign, and Fire Sovereign stepped forward. Their eyes were filled with solemnity, but they had no intention of retreating. Brother Guan, let me give you a hand too. Gong Xuequan, who was originally in charge of the scroll, handed it over to Elder Anshi. With a hearty laugh, he stepped out of the scroll barrier. Gong Xuequan took a step forward and his body grew 10 feet tall. In an instant, he turned into a giant that was 1,000,000 feet tall. Gong Xuequan's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth looked similar. It was the image of an old man with white hair and beard. However, his skin was greenish-black and there were many black scales on the surface of his skin. It looked a little strange. When Gong Xuequan unleashed his lawful embodiment of heaven and earth and appeared beside Guan Yihan, the Gold Sovereign, Water Sovereign, and Fire Sovereign did not want to be outdone. They stood in 3 different directions and unleashed their lawful embodiments of heaven and earth. Kill! Guan Yihan shouted. His entire body was filled with killing intent as he strode towards the giant infant at the front. Gong Xuequan, the Gold Sovereign, and the other 3 also launched unprecedented attacks towards their respective giant infants. 5 lawful embodiments of heaven and earth that were 1,000,000 feet tall attacked at the same time. The scene was simply too shocking and earth-shattering. Zhuowen, who was standing in the scroll, was puzzled. As one of the most dangerous places in the extraterritorial battlefield, the demonic corpse cliff was not an exception to the existence of the top-level ghost. However, what he found strange was that the appearance of these 5 ghosts was too coincidental. Moreover, they just so happened to surround their group. This was a little strange. At this moment, the 5 lawful embodiments of heaven and earth collided with the 5 giant infants. Terrifying energy exploded and set off a terrifying energy storm in the surroundings. The storm shot up to the sky like a giant pillar that pierced through the sky. The surrounding ground cracked, as if half of it had directly collapsed, forming one after another huge abyss-like craters. However, the people in the center of the scroll were not affected. Obviously, Guan Yihan and the rest could avoid them when they were fighting. Otherwise, they would have been affected a long time ago. 5 lawful embodiments of heaven and earth appeared at the same time. This is too strange. There's something fishy about this. Old man Anshi frowned slightly and muttered to himself with an unnatural expression. Brother Anshi, you mean? Li Yinglong asked in surprise. Maybe someone is behind this, Zhuowen said in a low voice. Li Yinglong and the rest of the people in the scroll were shocked. No way. Lawful embodiments of heaven and earth are monsters that are not weaker than lawful embodiments of heaven and earth. No one should be able to control them. Someone in the King of Hell's team immediately refuted. This is just my guess. Don't you think all of this is too much of a coincidence? Zhuowen said calmly. The gray fog here is too thick. Not only is our vision blocked, but even our divine senses are completely restricted. Otherwise, we would have been able to investigate the situation around us. Elder Anshi sighed and looked around. All he saw was gray fog. He was a little unwilling to admit defeat. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 45-52. I'll go and check it out, Zhuowen suddenly said. Everyone was shocked and looked at Zhuowen strangely. At this moment, they were surrounded by 5 pre-tier ghosts and were fighting fiercely with Guan Yihan and the other 4. Apart from that, there were also countless other evil spirits and ghosts that ran amok outside. Zhuowen's cultivation was the weakest here. Wouldn't it be suicide for him to go out rashly? Let me go. Elder Anshi looked at Zhuowen and said in a low voice. Zhuowen shook his head and said, Elder Anshi, if someone is really up to no good, you'll alert the enemy if you go and check it out. Elder Anshi frowned and said, Do you have a better idea? I have a secret skill that can go and check it out silently. Even a peak lawful embodiment of heaven and earth might not be able to detect my presence. As Zhuowen spoke, he turned into invisible water and slowly merged into the depths of the earth. Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, and everyone else in the scroll were surprised. At this moment, they could not sense any aura of Zhuowen. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air. Just as everyone was wondering, a stream of invisible water appeared on the ground where Zhuowen had disappeared. It seeped out and condensed into a human figure. After a while, Zhuowen's figure appeared in front of everyone again. What a magical and powerful secret skill! Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, and everyone else in the team could not help but exclaim in their hearts. If Zhuowen relied on this secret skill to check it out, they would be relieved. Zhuo Xiaoyu, be careful. If there's anything wrong, come back immediately. Elder Anshi patted Zhuowen's shoulder and reminded him in a low voice. Don't worry, Elder Anshi. I know what I'm doing. I'll go first. With that, Zhuowen turned into invisible water again and disappeared from the ground. In the northwest, there was a huge barren mountain about 1,000 meters away from Zhuowen and the others. At the top of this barren mountain, there was a vast open space. Around the barren mountain, there was a hazy gray fog. Countless evil spirits and ghosts were hidden in the gray fog, constantly letting out heart-palpitating howls that made one's heart tremble. Strangely, these evil spirits and ghosts avoided the empty space at the top of the barren mountain, intentionally or otherwise. It was as if this open space was a forbidden area for them. In the open space, there were two figures sitting at a stone table. They were drinking wine by themselves and chatting cheerfully. Shirtian, your 100 Ghosts portrait is really amazing. Not only can it make evil spirits and ghosts avoid it, but it also has the ability to guide them. The Ice Ghost King Ghost Child raised his wine glass and toasted the young man in front of him, praising him. The young man had shoulder-length blonde hair and a red vertical scar between his eyebrows. It was Sakyamuni. The 100 Ghosts portrait was bestowed upon me by my master before I left. This portrait is a treasure that is specially designed to counter evil spirits and ghosts. Sakyamuni smiled faintly. Haha. Guan Yihan and the others were attacked by 5 advanced grade ghosts. I'm afraid they're going to suffer heavy losses. If we rush over, I'm afraid they'll collapse even faster. The ghost child said carefree. Sakyamuni shook his head and said, That's not necessary. The 100 Ghosts portrait can only guide the ghosts, but it doesn't have the ability to control them. If we go over, we'll also be attacked by the ghosts. It's better to just watch from the sidelines. Hearing this, the ghost child nodded in agreement. I wonder if Su Jiang and Mi Haomiao have found the entrance to the ruins? Why haven't there been any news yet? The ghost child frowned slightly and complained. The entrance to the ruins isn't that easy to find. Just now we met a few groups, but none of them found the entrance. We just have to wait patiently. Sakyamuni leisurely sipped the wine in his glass and said contentedly. Although the ghost child was anxious, he did not show it on his face. Now, Sakyamuni's status was not what it used to be. Although he was the former senior, his status might not be comparable to the former's. Moreover, Sakyamuni was highly regarded by Master Yuanxing. In the future, his achievements would definitely be far beyond the 3 kings of the alternate ghost clan. Now, the ghost child had to purposely curry favor with Sakyamuni. Su Jiang sent a message. The ghost child's face lit up with joy. He took out the Jade Communication Talisman from his waist. After reading the Jade Communication Talisman, he said to Sakyamuni, Shirtian, they've found the entrance to the ruins. Now, a lot of groups are gathering at the entrance. Should we go over now? Sakyamuni slowly put down his wine glass and said with a faint smile, Yes, why not? after Sakyamuni kept the 100 ghosts' portrait and left the barren mountain. On the empty space at the top of the mountain, invisible water slowly seeped out. Finally, Zhuowen walked out of the invisible water and looked in the direction where Sakyamuni and the ghost child had left. So it was you guys who did it, Zhuowen muttered as he withdrew the chariot of chariots and followed silently. The divine chariot was too powerful. Wherever it passed, the evil spirits and ghosts could not catch up to it. Even the ghosts that caught up to him were easily refined by Zhuowen, assimilated into his body, and converted into his own energy. About half an hour later, the ghost child and Sakyamuni stopped. In front of them there was a gigantic storm. The two of them did not hesitate. They turned into two streams of light and entered the eye of the storm. Zhuowen, on the other hand, hid in the dark and observed silently. He only left when he saw several more teams rushing into the storm. When Zhuowen returned to the team, Guan Yihan had completely defeated the giant baby ghost in front of him. After all, Guan Yihan was an expert in the late stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The beginner ghost was naturally no match for him. After defeating the giant baby ghost, Guan Yihan strode toward Gold Lord, intending to help him. However, when Guan Yihan arrived, the ghost that he had defeated suddenly reformed. It let out an earth-shattering roar and rushed toward the group of people in the center of the scroll. Oh no! Guan Yihan realized that something was wrong. She turned around and charged at the ghost. However, he was too far away and could not make it in time. Master Li, let's go. Elder Anshi glanced at Li Yinglong and strode out of the scroll wall. His body became 1,000,000 feet tall and blocked in front of the scroll. Li Yinglong followed closely behind. 2,000,000 feet tall Dharma idols were like two immortal giants, completely blocking the ghost. However, the two of them were having a hard time resisting. The ghost that Guan Yihan was dealing with was the strongest among the 5 ghosts. Its strength was almost at the mid-level of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, and it was infinitely close to the mid-level. Zhuowen had just returned and saw this scene in front of him. Without thinking, he stepped into the void and rushed out of the scroll. Zhuowen, what are you doing out there? Come back quickly! The people in the scroll were shocked and hurriedly shouted at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's strength was not bad, but his cultivation was too weak. Wasn't he courting death by going head-to-head with the giant baby ghost? But Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to it. His entire person was like a bolt of lightning, appearing behind Gui Mei. His body emitted a blazing purple, gold, and black light. He gripped the Taiyu sacred sword tightly in his right hand and stood on the ghost's back. Rip! A huge wound appeared on the ghost's back. The wound looked as if it had been burned by fire. After it was cut open, it did not heal like before. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. Wonderful book house. Chapter 45-53. Roar! The giant infant let out a furious roar and swung its thick and strong arms toward the back. No matter how many times Guan Yihan smashed it, it was indifferent. However, Zhuowen only slashed it once with his sword, but it was so angry. This was because Guan Yihan had not caused any real damage to it, while Zhuowen had truly injured it. The giant infant was almost out of control because of the bone-deep pain. Zhuowen's expression was as calm as water. He stepped in the void and turned into a purple shadow, instantly disappearing. Roar! 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 The giant nascent soul roared angrily as it chased after Zhuowen. Its eyes were filled with killing intent and fury. It wanted to tear the human in front of it into pieces. Zhuo Xiaoyu, watch out! Seeing that the giant infant had given up on them and was chasing after Zhuowen, Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong's expressions changed. They turned around and chased after it, but the giant infant's speed suddenly became so fast that the two of them could not catch up. How did this ghost's speed suddenly become so fast? Elder Anshi cursed in his heart and his face was extremely ugly. It's over. He can't be the giant infant's match. Everyone shook their heads and sighed when they saw the giant infant rushing toward Zhuowen. This giant infant was the most terrifying of the 5 giant infants. It had reached an unprecedented level of the intermediate early stage. The gap between Zhuowen and this giant infant was too big. No one could believe that Zhuowen could survive the giant infant's attack. Zhuowen was still retreating. He looked at the giant infant that was getting closer and closer. His whole body erupted with thick and blazing devil qi. In an instant, Zhuowen entered the state of devil qi. Scarlet light burst out from the depths of his eyes. Waves of scarlet flames rushed out and turned into a fire dragon that swept toward the giant infant. Boom! The giant infant casually slapped and the space within thousands of miles collapsed, forming a terrifying huge spatial gully. As for the fire dragon formed from the demonic flames, it was smashed into smithereens by a casual slap of its hand. It couldn't be any more shattered. However, the giant baby did not slow down in the slightest as it continued to charge towards Zhuowen. A terrifying vibration swept out and shook violently as if the ground had lost its support. It was like duckweed floating on the sea, about to capsize at any time. Zhuowen's eyes were serious. The giant infant's strength was really terrifying. The devil qi had no effect on it. However, Zhuowen was still calm. As he retreated, he slashed with the Taiyu sacred sword and used one divine power after another. Heaven and earth, a silver lining. Sword shaking the 9 heavens. Life in the morning, death at night. The 3 techniques were unleashed at the same time, exploding with dazzling light as they shot towards the giant infant. These 3 divine powers contained Zhuowen's unique power to expel evil. He didn't believe that the giant baby wouldn't be affected at all. Sure enough, the giant baby's footsteps came to a halt, and a trace of fear appeared in its cold eyes. Boom! The giant infant's right foot stomped on the ground. Its huge body suddenly collapsed and completely merged into the surrounding gray mist. The 3 divine abilities flew over one after another, but they all missed their target and crashed into the ground, creating huge cracks in the ground. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He felt the temperature around him drop rapidly. The air and the ground were covered in a thick layer of frost. A sinister chill descended, causing Zhuowen's body to shiver. This chill penetrated deep into his bones and reached the depths of his soul. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the ear-piercing sound of wind breaking came from above Zhuowen's head. He jerked his head up. Far above him, the gray mist quickly gathered and turned into a huge giant infant. The giant infant fell at an extremely fast speed and crashed heavily. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the giant infant had completely enveloped Zhuowen. Then, a terrifying explosion rang out as the giant baby completely engulfed Zhuowen. The ground exploded, smashing out an unprecedented huge crater. Ring-shaped waves of air swept out in all directions at an extremely fast speed, pushing horizontally. It was extremely terrifying. No! Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong shouted at the same time. Their eyes were red as they pounced on the giant infant. The giant infant roared and punched out with both fists. A terrifying power exploded. Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong grunted at the same time and could not help but retreat several thousand feet. Guan Yihan was already on his way, but when he saw Zhuowen's figure drowned by the giant infant, he could not help but be stunned. Damn it! Guan Yihan was furious. Zhuowen had the incomplete map and was an important person who brought them into the ruins. Now, Zhuowen had died just like that. How could he not be angry? But soon, Guan Yihan found that something was wrong. He saw that the giant infant in the crater did not get up again. Instead, it was constantly struggling inside, as if it was trapped by something. Guan Yihan quickly rushed towards the giant infant. When he got close to the giant baby, he immediately sensed a murderous intent that made his heart tremble. This is... Only then did he discover that there were dense array patterns around the giant infant. These array patterns were constantly reorganizing and circulating in a strange trajectory, completely enveloping the giant infant. The killing intent that Guan felt came from this array. Boom, boom, boom. The giant infant let out an astonishing roar. Its huge arms were constantly waving, bombarding the dense array patterns that trapped it. The array patterns erupted with astonishing vibrations, but it resisted the giant infant's terrifying attack. This is a killing array of the fourth firmament of the eternal grade? Guan pupils shrank slightly, and he muttered to himself in a low voice. A killing array of the fourth firmament of the eternal grade was rare even in a super realm. Could it be that this killing array of the fourth firmament of the eternal grade is? Guan suddenly thought of a possibility and could not help but look in the other direction of the array. Sure enough, he saw a figure there. Senior Guan, please enter the array and help me kill this ghost. This figure was Zhuowen. He cupped his fists to Guan and said in a low voice. Guan frowned and said, Zhuo Xiaoyu, this first-level ghost is different from other ghosts. Even with my power, I can't completely destroy it. Even if you have such a killing array to trap it, you may not be able to completely destroy it. Zhuowen said lightly, Senior Guan, don't worry, I can destroy it. Because I have inherited the exorcism inheritance, it just so happens to restrain evil spirits. Guan was startled and took a deep look at Zhuowen. He naturally knew about the exorcist family. This kind of force was the most special force in the 100 domains outside the domain. It did not belong to any domain's jurisdiction and was a lone wolf. But it just so happened that only the exorcist family had the ability to exorcise and absolutely restrain evil spirit. This kind of power belonged to the exorcist family. Even super realms did not have this kind of power. In that case, I'll give you a hand. Guan smiled and stepped into the eternal ultimate killing array. Because the array was controlled by Zhuowen, Guan was not attacked by the killing array after entering the array. Chapter 45-54. I'll be in charge of restraining this ghost. I'll leave the rest to you. Guan took a deep look at Zhuowen, then strode toward the giant baby. She pressed her right hand against the giant baby's cheek, then pressed it down hard. The giant infant let out a shrill cry and struggled, but because the gap between it and Guan was too big, it could only take a beating. After the giant baby was pinned down by Guan, the ancient absolute killing god array, which had been violently shaken by the giant baby's attacks, calmed down. Moreover, it condensed even more powerful killing intent and continuously bombarded the giant baby. Zhuowen appeared beside the giant infant like a ghost and slashed at its right arm with the Taiyu sacred sword. Terrifying sword light poured out, and the giant infant's right arm exploded, opening a huge wound. This wound was charred black, and it did not heal like before. Waves of pure energy flowed into Zhuowen's body, making him feel comfortable from the inside out. Guan eyes lit up when he saw the wound on the giant infant's arm. It seemed like Zhuowen was right. He had indeed obtained the exorcism inheritance and could actually injure the giant infant. Slash! Zhuowen slashed out again, and a series of divine abilities poured out, landing on the giant infant's right arm. This slash was too powerful, and it directly cut off the giant infant's right arm from the shoulder. Roar! The giant infant sensed great danger and let out a furious roar. Its huge body began to move violently, and it wanted to send Guan flying. Unfortunately, Guan was as steady as Mount Tai. His 6 arms pressed the giant infant to the ground, and no matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free from Guan's powerful restraint. The giant infant's right arm fell to the ground like a mountain, creating a deep and huge crater. Zhuowen took a step forward and landed on the giant arm. The extreme nether holy sword pierced into the giant arm, and the giant arm turned into surging waves of energy that flowed into Zhuowen's body through the extreme nether holy sword. The primordial grand mist chant transformed the energy into extremely pure energy. Zhuowen raised his head and roared. The giant arm instantly turned into energy and fused into his body. Zhuowen's aura surged. He was like a god of war as he rushed towards the nascent soul. Soon, the giant baby's left arm and legs were chopped off by Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen did not refine it directly. Instead, he kept it in his great world and sealed it. The energy of the former ghost demon was too pure, and it would take him a lot of time to refine it. Now was the crucial moment to kill the giant nascent soul, so he naturally couldn't waste any time. Die! Zhuowen arrived by stepping on the air. His entire body streaked across the sky, bringing with it a white mist that left a long trail in the void. Zhuowen held the sword in his right hand and pointed it at the giant infant's head. Roar! 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 The giant nascent soul sensed the immense pressure of death and let out a shocking roar. Its struggle suddenly became extremely intense. Guan Yihan snorted coldly. A blazing golden light erupted from his body and completely suppressed the giant nascent soul. The moment the giant nascent soul was suppressed, Zhuowen flew over with the Taiyu sacred sword in his hand and stopped in between the giant nascent soul's eyebrows. He looked down at the giant nascent soul's eyes, which were much larger than his entire body, and said indifferently, "Die." Then, he held the hilt of the Taiyu sacred sword with both hands and stabbed it hard between the giant nascent soul's eyebrows. The giant nascent soul let out a dying wail. Its head kept shaking, but it couldn't stop the terrifying power of the Taiyu sacred sword from piercing through the giant nascent soul's eyebrows. Bang! 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 A series of muffled explosions erupted from inside the giant nascent soul's head. Then, the giant nascent soul let out a shrill cry. Its eyes were wide open, and a deep hole exploded in between its eyebrows. Endless green smoke rose from it. Boom! The giant nascent soul's huge head fell heavily, smashing a head-shaped hole in the ground. Guan Yihan's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth released the 6 arms that were suppressing the giant nascent soul. He looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. The ghost that had stumped him for a while was actually easily dealt with by Zhuowen. This was something he didn't expect. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and sealed the giant nascent soul's illusory corpse in the great world. "Senior Guan, help me deal with the other ghosts." Zhuowen looked up at Guan Yihan and said. Guan Yihan looked deeply at Zhuowen. He didn't ask why the latter took the giant nascent soul's corpse away. Instead, he nodded and led Zhuowen toward Gold Lord. Gold Lord's strength was on par with the giant nascent soul. The two of them were evenly matched. However, because the giant nascent soul couldn't feel pain or fatigue, the giant nascent soul had the absolute advantage in a protracted battle. Therefore, Gold Lord was at a disadvantage in the end. He was beaten back by the giant nascent soul. "Gold Lord, step back!" Guan Yihan shouted. The huge 3-headed and 6-armed lawful embodiment of heaven and earth stepped forward. Gold Lord heard him and quickly stepped aside. Guan Yihan brushed past him and slammed into the giant nascent soul's body. Bang! The giant nascent soul screamed. Its huge body flew hundreds of millions of feet away and landed heavily on the ground. Before the giant nascent soul could react, Guan Yihan was bathed in golden light. He descended from the sky and stomped heavily on the giant nascent soul's body. 6 arms pressed down on the giant nascent soul's body, restraining it on the ground. "Zhuo Xiaoyu!" Guan Yihan shouted. Zhuowen appeared like a ghost and slashed at the giant nascent soul's 4 limbs. This giant nascent soul's strength was much weaker than Guan Yihan's. Therefore, Zhuowen easily chopped off its 4 limbs. Then, he stabbed the Taiyu sacred sword deep between its brows. The exorcism energy completely destroyed the giant nascent soul. Then, Zhuowen and Guan Yihan worked together and killed one giant nascent soul after another. In the end, all 5 giant nascent souls were killed by Zhuowen. Many of the evil spirits and ghosts around them stayed far away. They didn't dare to get close to Zhuowen and his group. They all had a certain level of intelligence. When they realized that the ghosts and ghosts before them were killed, they naturally realized how powerful this group of human cultivators was. "Thank you, Brother Zhua." The Gold Lord, Water Lord, and Fire Lord quickly came over and cupped their fists at Zhuowen. There was sincere gratitude in their eyes. They knew very well that if it weren't for Zhuowen, even Guan Yihan might not be able to help them out. Gong Xuequan also cupped his fists at Zhuowen and said, "Zhua Xiaoyu, I underestimated you at first. It seems that I was wrong. Please forgive me." Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "Now that we're all in the same boat, there's no need to be so courteous. Next, we need to work together to overcome the difficulties of the ruins this time." Guan Yihan nodded with a smile. He admired Zhuowen more and more. "Senior Guan, it's not a coincidence that 5 ghosts and ghosts attacked at the same time." Suddenly, Zhuowen turned to Guan Yihan and said seriously. Guan Yihan narrowed his eyes and nodded. "Let's talk inside the scroll." Guan Yihan was not a fool. He had long suspected that the 5 ghosts and ghosts attacking at the same time was not a coincidence. Now that Zhuowen mentioned it, his eyes shone with a cold light. There was a trace of anger in his heart. Chapter 45-55. When Guan Yihan, Zhuowen, and the others entered the scroll, the King of Hell and the Black Thunder Royal Court went up to them and expressed their gratitude to Zhuowen. Everyone in the scroll was a discerning person. They could see that if it weren't for Zhuowen's help, Guan Yihan might not have been able to completely solve the problem of the giant baby ghost. "Zhua Xiaoyu, you were attacked by the giant baby ghost just now. It wasn't a coincidence." Guan Yihan looked at Zhuowen and asked with a serious expression. Everyone's gaze fell on Zhuowen. They were also very curious. As everyone knew, the giant baby ghost was a high-level ghost. They didn't think that anyone would have the ability to control a ghost of this level. Could it be that there was another secret behind this? "These are all the tricks of Sakyamuni and the ghost child." Zhuowen waved his sleeve with a calm expression, and an image floated in midair. This image recorded the scene of Sakyamuni and the ghost child in the open space on a barren mountain. Sakyamuni actually has the 100 Ghosts portrait. This is bad. This is a treasure that is specially used to deal with ghosts and evil spirits. Elder Anshi's expression changed drastically, and he couldn't help but exclaim. He came from the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy, so he naturally understood some of the treasures of the ancient Heavenly Tao Academy better than others. "What exactly is this 100 Ghosts portrait?" Guan Yihan's expression was gloomy, and he couldn't help but ask. He was extremely angry. He didn't expect the ghost child and Sakyamuni to trick him like this. If he had the chance, he would definitely take revenge for this. The 100 Ghosts portrait is a star weapon that is specially used to deal with evil spirits, ghosts, and other nothingness. With the 100 Ghosts portrait, Sakyamuni and the others will definitely have a huge advantage. Old Man Anshi sighed softly. He didn't expect that Master Yuanxing would actually give the 100 Ghosts picture to Sakyamuni. From this, it could be seen how important Sakyamuni was to Yuanxing. When we enter the ruins, we just need to be wary of Sakyamuni and the others. Our main mission is still the realm origin fragment. Guan Yihan saw that everyone was filled with righteous indignation and could not help but remind them. After everyone calmed down, they all nodded. "This time, I have another piece of information for you. I've already found the entrance to the ruins." Zhuowen continued with a smirk. Guan Yihan's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but look at Zhuowen. The others also looked at Zhuowen one after another. They were all very excited. "Zhua Xiaoyu, how did you find the entrance to the ruins?" Old Man Anshi asked excitedly. After I found Sakyamuni and the others, they also happened to find the entrance to the ruins, so I secretly followed them, Zhuowen explained tirelessly. Everyone also understood how Zhuowen was able to find the entrance to the ruins. There's no time to lose. Let's go to the entrance to the ruins. Guanihan was swift and decisive. After making the decision, he turned to Zhuowen and said, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, you lead the way." Zhuowen nodded and said, "Follow me." With that, Zhuowen led the way at the front, and the others followed closely behind. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, Zhuowen and the others arrived in front of the storm that Sakyamuni and the others had come to. This storm was really too terrifying. It penetrated the heavens and the earth. On the surface of the powerful storm, there was an extremely terrifying gray fog. The gray fog rapidly rotated along with the storm like gears, as if it could tear everything apart. Is the entrance inside? Old Man Anshi and the others' faces were slightly pale. They all felt a terrifying aura from the storm. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, are you sure that we won't be torn to pieces if we enter the storm?" Linglong's face was also a little unnatural as she asked. Sakyamuni and the ghost child went in directly. "This storm should be just an illusion," Zhuowen said. "I believe in Zhuo Xiaoyu." Guanihan rushed into the storm without hesitation and disappeared in an instant. The faces of the King of Hell's team changed drastically. But soon, Guanihan came out again after entering the heaven-piercing storm. "Zhuo Xiaoyu is right. This terrible storm is just an illusion," Guanihan said with a smile. The King of Hell's team sighed softly. "Let's go in together." After Zhuowen said calmly, he took the lead and rushed into the storm. Old Man Anshi, Li Yinglong, the King of Hell, and the Dark Thunder Royal Court followed. When Zhuo Wenyi entered the heavenly storm, he felt as if the world was spinning. In front of him was a deep whirlpool that spun the world. Zhuowen looked calm as he walked slowly into the depths of the whirlpool. Many illusions appeared in the whirlpool, but Zhuowen was unmoved. He didn't know how long he had walked in the whirlpool channel. When he completely came out of the whirlpool channel, what appeared in front of him was an extremely vast wasteland. At the end of the wasteland stood 9 huge golden gates. Each of the golden gates was thousands of feet tall. On the surface of the gates were engraved various patterns. The 9 golden gates exuded an ancient and vicissitude aura. "Is this the entrance to the ruins?" Old Man Anshi and Li Yinglong appeared behind Zhuowen. The two of them also stared at the 9 golden gates at the end of the wasteland. At the same time, Guanihan and Gong Xuequan led their teams and came not far behind Zhuowen. "Let's go. Let's go and have a look," Guanihan said to the crowd, then took the lead and rushed out. When Guanihan, Zhuowen, and the others finally arrived in front of the 9 golden gates, they found that many people had already gathered in front of the gates. "Huh! They're not dead?" In front of one of the golden gates, Sakyamuni, Ghost Child, and the others' pupils shrank the moment they saw Zhuowen and Guanihan. Especially when they saw that Zhuowen was completely unharmed, their expressions became unsightly. Although 5 low-level ghosts might not be able to do anything to a late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert like Guanihan, they should at least be able to make their team suffer heavy losses. But judging from the current situation, Guanihan's team didn't suffer any losses at all. This made them puzzled. Guanihan naturally noticed Ghost Child, Sakyamuni, and the others not far away. A cold light burst out from the depths of his eyes. If it weren't for Zhuowen's help, their team would have been screwed over by Ghost Child, Sakyamuni, and the others. Zhuowen coldly glanced at Sakyamuni, then withdrew his gaze and began to observe the crowd in front of the 9 golden gates. He found that the cultivators gathered here were basically distributed in front of the 9 golden gates. Ghost Child, Sakyamuni, and the others occupied the golden gate on the far right. At the golden gate beside them, there was a group led by a beautiful woman dressed in purple. And Zhuowen was no stranger to this team. It was the Amethyst King, Ziyixuan, whom he met once at the entrance of the extraterritorial battlefield. Ziyuan obviously also noticed Zhuowen. She smiled charmingly at Zhuowen, with a kind of flirtatious charm. However, Zhuowen could deeply feel the deep coldness in the depths of Ziyuan's eyes. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 45-56. It seems that this woman is indeed a very vengeful woman, just as Senior Guan said. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. How could he not feel Ziyuan's deep hostility towards him? After entering the ruins, Zhuowen would find an opportunity to make a breakthrough. In his macro world, there were 5 pre-level ghosts sealed. If he could completely refine them, he would be able to smoothly advance to the reverse ancient starlight level. At that time, his strength would also undergo a transformation by leaps and bounds. At that time, he might not necessarily be afraid of Ziyuan. Divine Blaze Domain, Purple Caltrip Domain, Cloud Dragon Domain, Alternate Ghost Domain, Void Yama Domain, Profound Thunder Domain, Blood Thorn Domain, Great Sun Domain, Dark Wind Domain. The ruins this time are really extraordinary. All 9 domains have gathered. Elder Anshi looked gravely at the teams of the 9 great golden gates, his face becoming solemn. Zhuowen's eyes fell mainly on the team of the Divine Blaze Domain. The Divine Blaze Domain was ranked first among the 9 great domains, stronger than the Alternate Ghost Domain. The lineup of the team they sent this time was naturally luxurious. The team of the Divine Blaze Domain was led by a slender blonde woman. The woman's golden hair shone brightly, like a wisp of golden flame, faintly burning and jumping. She is Golden Lamp Dharmaraja of the Divine Blaze Domain. Seeing Zhuowen's eyes fall on the blonde woman, Elder Anshi could not help but remind him. Is she very strong? Zhuowen turned his head to look at Elder Anshi, and asked in a low voice. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's aura was very strange. Sometimes it was strong and sometimes it was weak. It was erratic, like a flickering golden flame, elusive and unpredictable. Strong. Very strong. Although she is also at the late stage of law phenomenon, in terms of strength, she is above the Ghost Child and Void Yama, Elder Anshi said solemnly. Zhuowen's heart trembled. Guanihan and the Ghost Child were already strong enough, but Golden Lamp Dharmaraja was even stronger. It seemed that this trip to the ruins really could not be taken lightly. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja sensed something and couldn't help but raise his head to look at Zhuowen. His beautiful eyes emitted a sharp golden light. Dharmaraja, what's wrong? The beautiful woman beside Golden Lamp Dharmaraja followed his line of sight and looked at Zhuowen. She asked doubtfully. Jindeng Fuang smiled and said, It's nothing. I just think that the little guy is a little interesting. The beautiful woman looked at Zhuowen in puzzlement. She was puzzled. In her eyes, Zhuowen was just an ant at the pinnacle of the cosmic Dharma plane. How could such an ant attract the attention of a Dharma king? She was really puzzled. However, since Jinluan Fuang didn't say anything, she naturally didn't dare to ask. Next, with Old Man Anshi's introduction, Zhuowen had a certain understanding of the teams from the other super domains. The Blood Thorn domain was second only to the Divine Spark domain and the other Ghost domain among the super domains. The leader of the team they sent this time was a proud man in blood-red robes. The man in blood-red robes was called Xuefeng. He was one of the 2 kings of the Blood Thorn domain, the Blood-Robed King. The team from the Cloud Dragon domain was basically made up of Taoist priests. The leader was an old Taoist with an immortal aura. The old Taoist priest was called Jing Shirley. His strength was also extraordinary. He looked like a good person, but in fact, he was ruthless and decisive. The other 2 teams were from the Great Sun domain and the Dark Wind domain. Both teams were led by their kings. Each of these 7 teams basically occupied 1 golden gate. The remaining 2 golden gates were divided among the many teams of rogue practitioners. Because there were too many people in the procession, the front of the 2 golden gates looked very noisy. It seems that these 9 golden gates are the entrances to the ruins. We should need to occupy one of the golden gates. As Guan spoke, his eyes fell on the 2 golden gates occupied by the rogue practitioners. He stepped on the air and slowly landed above one of the golden gates, looking down at the rogue practitioners below. I'll give you 3 breaths of time to scram. Otherwise, you'll die. Guan aura gushed out. The powerful aura overflowed like a vast ocean, instantly enveloping all the rogue practitioners in the Golden Gate. It's the virtual king of hell. The rogue practitioners in front of the Golden Gate all revealed a look of fear, trembling all over. Scram! Guan shouted. Suddenly, all the rogue practitioners in the Golden Gate scattered like birds and beasts. The gap between them and Guan was too great. It was simply too easy for the latter to destroy them. The rogue cultivators who had left were unwilling to give up. Instead, they turned their gazes to the last golden door. The rogue practitioners in the last golden gate immediately tensed up. One after another, they took out their divine weapons and looked warily at the rogue practitioners who were driven out. Guan naturally ignored the rogue practitioners he had driven away. He said to Gong Xuequan, Zhuowen and the others, "Let's wait at this golden gate. I think the golden gate will open soon." Gong Xuequan, Zhuowen and the others naturally wouldn't refuse. Next, everyone settled down in front of the golden gate. Some sat cross-legged to cultivate, some tidied up their divine weapons, and some chatted with the other teams they were familiar with. Guan, I remember that the King of Hell didn't get the map fragment. Why are you here? Not long after Guan and the others landed, a strange voice came from a golden gate next to them. Guan raised his head and looked at the man in red in front of the golden gate. He said lightly, "Blood Robe King, this has nothing to do with you, right?" The man in red was the Blood Robe King of the Blood Thorn Boundary, Xuefeng. Xuefeng grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. His gloomy eyes looked at Zhuowen intentionally or unintentionally. Zhuowen naturally felt Xuefeng's malicious gaze, and his heart was filled with surprise. He seemed to have never seen this person before. Why did he feel that this person was targeting him? "You don't have to worry about that," Guan said coldly. Xuefeng didn't let it go. He stared at Zhuowen coldly and continued, "If I'm not wrong, you came in with the help of the map fragment on this ant." Guan pupils shrank. He looked at Xuefeng deeply and wondered how Xuefeng knew that Zhuowen had the map fragment on him. There shouldn't be many people who knew that Zhuowen had the map fragment. Zhuowen's eyes focused. He looked at Xuefeng coldly and said in a low voice, "How did you know? Do you still remember Blood Beauty?" Xuefeng said lightly, "Blood Beauty is one of your people?" Zhuowen's pupils shrank. Back then, the bright lamp old man, Blood Beauty and Yunshenzi chased after him for a long time because of the map fragment. Although he escaped successfully, the bright lamp old man and the other 2 didn't give up. It was only when he came to the Purple Heaven Holy Ground that he met them again. He cleverly made use of his relationship with the Purple Heaven Holy Ground's old sovereign to let the people of the Purple Heaven Holy Ground capture the 3 of them. He wasn't very clear about the specific situation of the 3 of them. It was the Purple Heaven Holy Ground's matter. XDW 8-inch, it's one of my subordinates. I also just got the news about you not long ago. You're quite capable, Ant. You actually managed to keep the map fragment. Xuefeng sneered disdainfully. Chapter 45-57. You keep saying that I'm an ant, but you didn't even get the map fragment in my hands. What qualifications do you have to talk about me? Zhuowen's gaze turned cold, and he retorted without any trace of politeness. This Xuefeng's high and mighty appearance made Zhuowen rather displeased in his heart. Xuefeng's gaze narrowed, his body erupting with a chilling aura. He did not expect that Zhuowen, a mere ant, actually dared to rebuke him. This made him rather furious in his heart. Aunt, you're indeed arrogant. Don't think that just because the lackeys I sent out can't do anything to you, you think that I can't do anything to you too. Xuefeng threatened. Xuefeng, don't go overboard. Zhuo Xiaoyu is my friend. If you dare to make a move on him, don't blame me for not being courteous either. Guan Yihan said coldly. Xuefeng sensed the powerful aura released by Guan Yihan, and his pupils constricted. Originally, he thought that Guan Yihan and Zhuowen only had an ordinary cooperative relationship, but he did not expect that Guan Yihan was actually so protective of Zhuowen. Guan Yihan, this boy should be given to you. That's why you're so protective of him, right? How about this? I also have a map fragment here. I can give you some slots. How about you hand this boy to me? Xuefeng said coolly. But Guan Yihan rejected immediately. Xuefeng, do you take me to be a fool? Putting aside whether you'll give me the slots or not, I, Guan Yihan, am also not a person who goes back on his word. I'm different from you. Xuefeng was angered until his entire body was trembling. Guan Yihan's words were mocking him as a treacherous villain. Humph, I want to see just how long you can protect him? Xuefeng flicked his sleeves and left, returning to the team he was in. Zhuo Xiaoyu, how did you cross paths with Xuefeng's people? Old man Anqi asked softly. Back then, when I was fighting for the map fragment, I had some disputes with his subordinate. That's why he would know me. Zhuowen explained. Old man Anqi nodded his head and said rather worriedly, Then you have to be careful. Xuefeng was a very narrow-minded person, but his strength was extremely powerful. Once he finds an opportunity in the ruins, he will definitely be ruthless to you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Zhuowen nodded. Next, Zhuowen sat cross-legged beside the golden door. His eyes were slightly closed, and his divine sense was communicating with the outside world. He first communicated with Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, Luoye, and the others, then began to refine the giant baby's corpse sealed in the great world. Billowing waves of cold yin energy swept out from the outside world and poured into Zhuowen's body. Afterwards, this cold qi was refined by Zhuowen, turning into the purest energy that nourished his entire body, causing his aura to continuously strengthen. The energy of the first-level ghost demon was indeed pure and powerful. As he continued to refine it, Zhuowen's aura also increased faster and faster. The commotion on Zhuowen's side naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Guan Yihan took a deep look at Zhuowen and actively released his aura to cover Zhuowen. The other members of the Golden Door naturally noticed the movements of the Golden Door where Guan Yihan was. After discovering that it was Guan Yihan who actively released his aura, they withdrew their gazes. Xuefeng, who was next to the Golden Door, glanced at Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged, and smiled eerily. When Zhuowen touched the threshold of a breakthrough, he stopped refining and slowly opened his slightly closed eyes. After he had refined the 3 giant babies' corpses, Zhuowen was already on the verge of a breakthrough. As long as he continued to refine them, he would be able to break through to the inverse ancient starlight. But he did not do so. He had not yet entered the ruins, and there were so many people here. It was not a good idea to break through here. Suddenly, Zhuowen felt a strong burning sensation from the map fragment on his body, and then it burst out with a crimson light. The crimson light rushed out from the map fragment and shot toward the huge golden door in front of Zhuowen. In the center of the golden door, a crimson pattern appeared. The situation of the other 8 golden doors was similar. The map fragments that they each held also shot out crimson light, and a crimson pattern was branded on the golden door. It seems that the time is up. The door of the ruins is about to open. Guan Yihan's eyes were filled with excitement as he muttered to himself. The rest of the people were the same. They looked at the golden door in excitement. The 9 golden doors suddenly burst out with a blazing golden light. The strong light rushed into the sky and dyed the gray fog in the sky into a golden fog. Clang! Clang! Between heaven and earth, there was the sound of metal clashing. It was endless and reverberating. Under the excited and expectant eyes of the crowd, the 9 golden doors slowly opened. Zhuowen silently looked at the golden doors that opened to both sides. Behind the golden doors was a blazing light. He could not see what was behind the golden doors. The ruins are behind the golden doors. Let's go. Someone suddenly shouted. Suddenly, many cultivators rushed behind the golden doors. Especially the golden door that was full of rogue cultivators. The rogue cultivators rushed forward one after another, afraid that the golden door would close directly if they were a step slower. On the other hand, Guan Yihan, Shuefeng, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, and the other super domain teams did not move at all. They just silently looked at the last golden door and the rogue cultivators who were scrambling to get in first. There were too many rogue cultivators at the last golden door. There were thousands of them. About half of them entered, and the golden door slowly closed. Some rogue cultivators who could not dodge in time were directly caught by the golden door, and their bodies and souls were destroyed. No, we haven't gone in yet. Many rogue cultivators who were trapped outside the golden door frantically knocked on the golden door, wanting to open it again and let them in. Unfortunately, their golden door was full. It was impossible for the golden door to open again. Let's go in, Sakyamuni said indifferently and stepped into the golden door first. Ghost Child, Su Jiang, and Mi Haomiao followed closely behind. Behind them were the teams from the other forces that they had brought. These teams were all recruited by Su Jiang and Mi Haomiao. When they were in the encampment, their incomplete maps had been successfully auctioned off, allowing them to make a huge profit. Of course, not all teams with incomplete maps were like Su Jiang and Mi Haomiao, who would auction off their incomplete map. Zhuowen did not do that. He only gave the quotas to people he trusted. As for the extra quotas, he did not care at all and did not plan to auction them off. Let's go in too. Guan Yihan looked at Zhuowen, asking for his opinion. Let's go in. Zhuowen nodded, and the group of them stepped through the golden door. The other teams from the golden door also entered their respective golden doors. When all the teams entered the golden door, the rogue cultivators in front of the last golden door immediately took advantage of the chaos and rushed to the other golden doors. They knew very well that there were many quotas for each incomplete map. Most of the teams from the other golden doors did not have many people, so there were definitely many extra quotas. Chapter 45-58. Unfortunately, these cultivators had a good plan, but the reality was cruel. When they approached the other golden doors suddenly burst out with terrifying energy and killed those cultivators who were close to the golden doors. When they saw the fate of these cultivators, the rest of the cultivators who were not close stopped and looked at the scene in front of them with fear. When all the teams entered the golden doors, the other 8 golden doors also closed one by one. This is a complete world. When Zhuowen walked out of the tunnel behind the golden doors, he felt as if he had traveled through time. Then he saw that he was standing on the peak of a mountain, and in the distance there was a vast field. Further in the field there were many mountains, rivers, lakes, and valleys. It was full of vitality, as if he was in a fairyland. Guan Yihan stood beside Zhuowen and looked down at the great rivers and mountains in front of him, frowning slightly. Is this the interior of the ruins? Where are the people of the other teams? Gong Xuequan looked around and found that there was only their group, so he asked curiously. The 9 golden doors should correspond to 9 different places. The other teams are probably in other places in this world. Zhuowen analyzed. This world is vast and boundless. How are we going to find the fragments of the origin of the realm? Guan Yihan frowned. He spread out his divine sense to the maximum range, but he could only observe a corner of this world. In such a vast world, how was he going to find the fragments of the origin of the realm he was looking for? Zhuowen took out the map fragment but found that the map fragment did not respond. At this moment, the remnant map looked like an ordinary map. Let's first divide into 3 groups and look around this world. If you find anything or if there is any situation, inform me immediately. Zhuowen muttered. Guan nodded and said, "This is the only way. How about this? The King of Hell will be in one group, Dark Thunder Royal Court will be in another group, Zhuo Xiaoyu and Anxi will be in a group. How about it?" Okay. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. After splitting into groups, the 3 groups flew off in different directions. Guan Yihan headed east, Gong Xuekuan headed west, and Zhuowen's group headed south. After flying for several days, Zhuowen, Elder Anxi, and the others all felt strange. This world seemed to be full of vitality, but there were no living creatures. Whether it was the mountains, rivers, or lush forests, they didn't see any living creatures. How can this world be so huge? We flew at full speed for 3 days, but we still couldn't reach the borders of this world. Li Yinglong said with a strange expression. Follow me. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen took out the chariot and called Li Yinglong and Old Man Anxi up. The 2 of them had seen Zhuowen's mount before and knew that it was extremely fast. Perhaps by relying on their mounts, they could reach the edge of this world. At that time, they would be able to fully understand what was going on in this world. Whoosh! After Li Yinglong and Old Man Anxi got into the chariot, Zhuowen formed a seal with his hands. The chariot tore through the sky like a bolt of lightning and instantly disappeared. Half a day later, the chariot of chariots stopped in the air above an endless forest. Zhuowen's expression turned extremely unsightly. With the speed of the chariot of chariot, half a day was enough to cross many realms. But here, they still couldn't leave this world. This made Zhuowen feel that something was wrong. Unbelievable! Even with the speed of this chariot, we still can't reach the edge of this world after half a day. Just how vast is this world? Old Man Anxi said in shock. Zhuowen didn't say a word. He drove the chariot toward the south again. Another half a day passed, and they appeared in the air above a huge city. This city was grand and imposing, with rows upon rows of richly ornamented buildings. It was very luxurious and extravagant. On the central street of the city there were many stalls. The shops on both sides were completely open, as if the owners were selling their own things. But here was the strange part. The shops were open, and there were stalls on the streets, but there was no one. It was as if the people in the city had disappeared into thin air. Zhuowen drove the chariot of chariot to the central street of the city. He spread out his consciousness and searched every corner of the city. But what made his expression turn grave was that there was indeed no one in the city. What's going on with this world? Old Man Anxi and Li Yinglong walked on the central street, observing the shops that had opened around them. They felt even more strange. Did a sentence appear when the map fragment reacted for the first time? Zhuowen suddenly stopped and turned to look at Old Man Anxi and Li Yinglong. What did it say? The 2 of them looked at Zhuowen and asked curiously. The wheel of history has begun to turn. Malicious spirits roar in the abyss. All living beings sink in the sea of bitterness. The door to the abyss has opened. Those who enter this door must give up everything. Zhuowen slowly recited the words that had appeared on the map fragment. Old Man Anxi and Li Yinglong frowned when they heard this. The words that Zhuowen recited were too profound and obscure for them. These words might have something to do with this world. Could it be a metaphor? Zhuowen murmured. Wait, this sentence says that all living beings sink in the sea of bitterness. Could it be that the living beings in this world are the living beings in this world? Old Man Anxi suddenly asked. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. He said in a deep voice, "It's very likely. From all the signs, the living beings in this world must have lived here before. But for some reason, they disappeared without a trace. Perhaps they entered the sea of bitterness. But what is the sea of bitterness? At this point, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He repeated these words over and over again, and a bright light shone in the depths of his eyes. The door to the abyss has opened. It seems that I was wrong. The door is not a metaphor for the golden door that we used to enter the ruins. It should be another door, and the sea of bitterness should be in the abyss. Zhuowen was suddenly enlightened. He knew that as long as he found the door to the abyss, he would be able to enter the real ruins. Thinking of this, he waved his sleeve and released Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoye from the outside world. Brother Duan, Ziyang, Luoye, split up with me and search this giant city. If there is anything special, inform me immediately. Do you understand? Zhuowen ordered in a low voice. Zhuo Xiaoyu, do you suspect that there are clues in this giant city? Old man Anqi asked. Yes, we flew such a long distance before we saw such a complete giant city. This itself is a little strange. If there is a clue, it is very likely to be here, Zhuowen said. Li Yinglong nodded in agreement. He also summoned Li Ying and Li Shuo and instructed them to search the giant city carefully. Soon, the group split up in different directions and began a carpet search of the giant city. Chapter 45-59. Zhuowen walked slowly on the central street of the giant city. The surroundings were silent as if they were isolated from the world, causing a chill to run down their spines. He carefully observed the shops on both sides of the street with a touch of doubt and chilliness in the depths of his eyes. He found that everything in the shops was fresh, without any dust on the surface. Logically speaking, if this giant city had been abandoned for a long time, the shops should be filled with dust. However, what Zhuowen observed was completely different. It was as if this giant city was still bustling with people a moment ago, but in the next moment, all of them had suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a thoughtful look as he stepped into a shop next to him. The shop he entered was a weapon shop. The interior area was not large, only about 50 to 60 square meters, and there were all kinds of weapons displayed on the walls. Zhuowen strolled around the weapon shop and found a bloody handprint on the counter. He carefully observed the bloody handprint and was surprised to find that although the bloodstains on the handprint had dried up, it should not have been there for long, at most 3 or 4 days. After taking a deep look at the bloody handprint, Zhuowen left the weapon shop and began to search for other shops. What surprised him was that there was a bloody handprint in every shop, but the position of the bloody handprint was different. However, what Zhuowen did not notice was that every time he walked out of the shop, the bloody handprint in the shop wriggled slightly, and its position slightly changed from the beginning. After Zhuowen left the street, what appeared in front of him was a river that almost ran through the entire giant city. The flow of the river was rapid, and the sound of water flowing could be heard incessantly, trickling into one's ears. On the opposite side of the river was a vast residential area with all kinds of pavilions. Zhuowen could feel that the building complex on the opposite side was a place of good feng shui, and the chaotic energy was particularly abundant. Obviously, the people who lived here were basically cultivators with good strength. 100 meters to Zhuowen's left, there was a huge arched bridge. Zhuowen did not directly fly across the river. Instead, he walked onto the arched bridge and entered the opposite bank. However, after Zhuowen crossed the arched bridge, the bloody handprints in the shops behind him seemed to come alive and walked out of the shops. Streaks of bloody handprints were densely packed as they walked out of the shops onto the street. More and more bloody handprints appeared on the street, soundless and extremely strange. After Zhuowen entered the residential area, his gaze became more and more serious. He felt that this area of buildings was even quieter than the shops on the other side of the bridge. There was a strange rancid smell in the air. Creak. Zhuowen opened the front door of the house. What surprised him was that the door didn't have any restrictions and was easily pushed open. The courtyard was lush and verdant, surrounded by rockery and numerous pavilions. It had a different kind of elegance. For some reason, the moment Zhuowen entered the house, he felt that the rotten smell in the air was getting thicker, causing him to frown slightly. He crossed the courtyard, entered the inner residence, and stepped into the hall with the door open. In the middle of the hall, there was a plaque with the words, "Dim Bright Bright," written on it. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the wall in front of the hall. There was a bloody footprint on it. The bloody footprint was not big. It was about the size of a baby and looked very pocket-sized. Zhuowen frowned. It felt a little strange. The shops on the other side of the arched bridge had bloody handprints, but the residential area had bloody footprints. He walked out of the house and entered the other houses. Indeed, he found the same bloody footprints in them. As he went deeper into the residential area, the rancid smell in the air became thicker. When Zhuowen walked to the edge of the residential area, there was a rockery that was 100 meters high in front of him. The strange thing was that the rockery was actually blood-red, as if it was dyed by bright red blood. It looked very strange. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He felt that the shape of the rockery was a little strange. He leaped up and floated in the air, looking down at the blood-red rockery in front of him. Looking down from the sky, the shape of the rockery was actually in the shape of a head. However, the head was completely dyed red, and the flesh was badly mangled. It was impossible to see the true face of the head. However, from the outline of the head, Zhuowen could still see that it was the head of a woman. Zhuowen landed on the peak of the mountain. Only then did he realize that the red color on the surface of the rockery was sticky blood that had not completely dried up. An intense rancid smell assailed his nostrils, causing Zhuowen to frown involuntarily. Suddenly, Zhuowen noticed that blood-red eyes appeared on the surface of the rockery. These eyes opened and flickered with a strange blood-red light. They all stared at Zhuowen and stared at him closely. Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. He lightly stomped his feet, and a surge of divine power gushed out, wanting to trample and destroy all the eyes on the surface of the rockery. However, what shocked him was that the surface of the rockery surged with blood-red energy, condensing into an incomparably sturdy blood-red barrier on the surface of the rockery. Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly. He leaped up and floated in the air, looking down at the strange rockery below with a grave gaze. As Zhuowen leaped into the air, the eyeballs on the rockery followed Zhuowen and stared at him closely. At the same time, a horrifying sound suddenly came from the residential complex in front of the rockery, as well as the street shops across the arched bridge. On the ground in the middle of the street shops, dense bloody handprints appeared. Dense bloody footprints could be seen on the roadside of the residential area. It was as if there were many bloody hands and feet that were quickly crawling toward the rockery. However, what was strange was that apart from these bloody handprints and bloody footprints that appeared out of thin air, Zhuowen did not see anything in front of him. He did not even sense any aura. The horrifying sound came closer and closer, and the bloody handprints and bloody footprints appeared on the surface of the rockery. Thick blood flowed out of the surface of the rockery, slowly seeping out. It was a frightening sight to behold. A strong rancid stench swept over, causing Zhuowen to feel nauseous. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the sound of wind breaking could be heard in the air, as if it could pierce one's eardrums. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He pulled out the Taiyu sacred sword from his great world and slashed out. Rays of sword light swept out like rain. The sound of continuous collisions rang out in the air. Then, the surface of Zhuowen's Taiyu sacred sword burst out with dazzling sparks. Zhuowen hovered in the air, and could not help but retreat dozens of steps. The moment he retreated, more and more sounds of wind swept over, blasting toward Zhuowen from all directions. Zhuowen did not even think about it. He summoned his spiritual sword intent, which circled around him like swimming fish. Chapter 4560. Chi, 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 Chi. After the soul sword intent formed an impenetrable barrier around him, the invisible things around him were all blocked and emitted strange sounds. Zhuowen found that wisps of green smoke appeared on the surface of the soul sword intent barrier, as if something had been burned and emitted smoke. Then, there were shrill screams around him. The screams were so shrill that they went deep into the soul, causing Zhuowen to feel extremely uncomfortable. The sound of the air breaking became more and more frequent, and the number of invisible things increased. The green smoke also became denser and denser. At the same time, the fake mountain of skulls under Zhuowen's feet suddenly rose from the ground and rushed towards Zhuowen. On the front of the fake mountain, a mouth full of white teeth was revealed. Then, the teeth suddenly opened, and a huge mouth came towards Zhuowen to devour him. Zhuowen's expression was gloomy. He stepped out of the void with his right foot and barely dodged the ferocious mouth of the fake mountain. Then, without thinking, he rushed towards the front of the giant city. He quickly took out the communication jade talisman from his waist and sent a message to Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, and the others, asking them about the situation over there. Soon, he received their messages, and his expression became even more unsightly. Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, Duan Jipeng, and the others had all encountered similar strange things in other parts of the giant city. Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong were fine. They were experts at the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth level. Although these strange things were impossible to guard against, they could not do anything to them. However, Li Ying, Li Shua, Duan Jipeng, and the others were slightly weaker. The current situation was not optimistic. Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong had already rushed to Li Ying and Li Shua's side. They were not far away, so Li Ying and Li Shua should not have too much of a problem. After receiving the location sent by Duan Jipeng, Zhuowen rushed towards Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoye without looking back. Bang! 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 The moment Zhuowen left, the strange sounds became even more intense. The sound of the air breaking was incessant and terrifying. Zhuowen continuously released his soul sword intent to resist the attacks coming from behind, and his speed increased. Duan Jipeng and the other two were at the market square in the north of the giant city. There were many markets in the north of the giant city, and they were even more prosperous than the central street. However, because there was not a single person in the marketplace, it seemed incomparably cold and cheerless. But it was in this cold and quiet marketplace that the sound of invisible collisions rang out endlessly. One by one, the shops in the market exploded and huge footprints appeared on the roads in the center of the market. In a remote alley of the market, Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoye were looking ahead vigilantly. A powerful aura erupted from the three of them as resplendent star god power encircled their bodies. In the void behind the three of them, three enormous starlight worlds appeared. Bang! 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 In front of the three of them, the sound of huge footsteps continuously resounded from afar. Huge footprints appeared one after another on the ground. Rip! Suddenly, a terrifying sound of air being torn apart rapidly approached. It was like the sound of a blade cutting through cloth, ear-piercing and strange. Duan Jipeng's expression changed drastically as he shouted, "Its attack is coming again, let's join hands to block it." As he spoke, Duan Jipeng pushed out his palms, and vast star god power poured out like an ocean. Ziyang and Luoye behind Duan Jipeng also used their full strength. Three powerful star god powers condensed together, forming a terrifying shockwave, and fiercely collided with the invisible attack that was tearing through the air. Crack! 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 The two collided, and the sound of continuous explosions erupted in the air. The terrifying invisible shockwave swept out, and the nearby buildings in the market collapsed layer by layer. Duan Jipeng and the other two's faces were deathly pale, and they spat out a mouthful of blood as they flew backwards in a sorry state. The moment they fell to the ground, the terrifying sound of air being torn apart quickly rushed over, and fiercely whipped towards Duan Jipeng and the other two. Not good. Duan Jipeng's expression changed drastically. He did not expect that the three of them joining hands would not be a match for this invisible thing. The moment the sound of air being torn apart was about to hit the three of them, a blazing sword light like a rising sun appeared in front of them. Bang! 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 The sword light exploded, and a blazing white light spread out, enveloping the entire sky above the market. The invisible thing could not help but retreat a few steps, and its huge feet left repeated footprints on the ground. Zhuowen stepped on the air, and blocked in front of Duan Jipeng and the other two. Brother Zhuo! Master! Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luo Ye saw Zhuowen's back, and all of them cried out in surprise. Are you all okay? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Duan Jipeng shook his head and then said, Brother Zhuo, we have made an important discovery here. In the center of this market there is a secret passage that leads directly to the depths of the ground. Have you gone in to investigate? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Before we could, this strange thing appeared, and we were forced to leave, Ziyang said with a bitter smile. Zhuowen nodded and continued, I know. You guys go into the outside world first, and report the details to me in the outside world. With that, Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and Duan Jipeng and the other two were sent into the outside world. That formless colossus attacked once again. Its speed and power were even greater than before. At the same time, the ground around the market was covered in bloody handprints and bloody footprints. Zhuowen's expression was ugly. He did not expect that these bloody handprints and bloody footprints would chase after him. What made Zhuowen's expression even more gloomy was that behind the bloody handprints and bloody footprints, the skull-shaped rockery was slowly rolling over, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. Boom! The invisible giant in the market once again launched a terrifying attack. Zhuowen struck out with the Taiyu sacred sword, and used the heaven and earth a silver lining. A huge sword light that seemed to penetrate the heavens and the earth came across the sky, and heavily slashed at the invisible giant, forcing it to retreat. On the other hand, boundless soul sword insight shot out from the space between Zhuowen's brows and shot out like a rainstorm, and it obstructed the shapeless blood palm and blood footprint. After blocking this wave, Zhuowen stepped out and swept toward the center of the market like a wisp of smoke. After entering the outside world, Duan Jipeng had told him the specific location of the secret passage. However, the market had been completely surrounded by the bloody handprints and bloody footprint. If Zhuowen wanted to enter, he could only force his way in. Zhuowen instantly entered the state of demonic corruption, and thick demonic mist lingered around his body. Wisps of scarlet demonic flames rushed out and spread around his body, turning into a sea of fire. Just like that, Zhuowen fell straight down like a comet, smashing heavily into the ground and erupting with endless scarlet flames. Suddenly, the bloody handprints and bloody footprints were blasted out by him. At the same time, he discovered that there was a bronze manhole cover on the ground. This manhole cover was square, and its surface was engraved with all kinds of patterns. The moment Zhuowen was about to open the manhole cover, a huge black shadow completely enveloped him, and what followed was a violent earthquake. Zhuowen suddenly raised his head and found that the skull-shaped rockery was already close at hand. The eyes on the surface of the rockery were staring at him, sending chills down his spine. Chapter 4561. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The strange head mountain suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a scarlet gust of wind. This scarlet gust of wind turned into a scarlet wind dragon that swept towards Zhuowen with unparalleled momentum, completely entangling Zhuowen. Zhuowen coldly snorted and slashed out with the High Abyss sacred sword. Endless black sword light burst out and tore the scarlet wind dragon to pieces. Bang bang bang! The moment Zhuowen tore apart the scarlet wind dragon, there was a shocking sound of huge footsteps behind him. The invisible thing in the market was walking over, leaving huge footprints on the ground as it rapidly spread towards Zhuowen. A terrifying sound of something breaking through the air quickly attacked Zhuowen from behind. Zhuowen had no choice but to turn around and slash out with the high abyss sacred sword, colliding with the invisible sound of something breaking through the air. A powerful force burst out and Zhuowen let out a muffled groan as he was forced to fly back, away from the manhole cover. As for the invisible thing, it chased after Zhuowen. Huge footprints continuously appeared on the ground, spreading towards Zhuowen. Life in the morning, death in the evening. Zhuowen's face was gloomy as he changed the momentum of his sword and displayed his strongest divine ability. Heaven and earth seemed to rise and fall as a sword light swept over and collided with the invisible thing. The figure of the formless thing that was originally rushing over could not help but stop. Furthermore, with the same speed, it retreated backwards. Zhuowen took a step forward and his sword momentum rose again. An even fiercer sword light came from a distance and blasted the invisible thing, forcing it to continue to retreat. The surrounding bloody handprints and bloody footprints gathered here, but Zhuowen was not afraid in the slightest as the spiritual sword intent between his eyebrows continued to rush out. Under the state of demonic corruption, his strength had increased tremendously and he was much stronger than before. After forcing back the huge invisible thing, the head mountain rolled over at an extremely fast speed. The body of the mountain was simply too large. Zhuowen was like a tiny ant in front of it. Zhuowen did not retreat but advanced instead. The aura of the peak cosmic Dharma idol suddenly erupted as 9 cosmic Dharma idols appeared one by one. The 9 huge cosmic Dharma idols blocked the head mountain that was rapidly rolling over. Zhuowen turned and quickly rushed towards the manhole cover. Along the way, the bloody handprints and bloody footprints were all destroyed by his spiritual sword intent. Bang bang bang! The huge invisible thing once again rushed towards Zhuowen. But Zhuowen was already prepared. He waved his right hand and translation array art. Array disk art translation for translation. Array formation patterns as translation of art translation array art as translation for translation in the CC and translation of array formation, colliding with the huge invisible thing and Zhuowen. Zhuowen was translation of is translation of translation is translation is translation is translation 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 is translation 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 translation. The moment Zhuowen entered the secret passage, the huge invisible thing had already torn apart all the array formation patterns and arrived at the entrance of the secret passage of the manhole cover. But the invisible thing seemed to be afraid of something and did not dare to enter the secret passage at all. It only lingered at the entrance and let out a heart-shaking roar. In the secret passage, Zhuowen saw that the thing outside did not chase in and understood that this secret passage had a certain restriction on it. After he was relieved, he began to follow the secret passage and went deeper and deeper. For some reason, the moment he entered the secret passage, he felt like he was being watched. This feeling made him a little uncomfortable, and as he went deeper and deeper, this feeling of being watched became more and more intense. The secret passage was not very deep. After about an hour, Zhuowen had already reached the end of the secret passage. Walking out of the secret passage, what appeared in front of him was a gray sea. This gray sea stretched as far as the eye could see and almost merged with the gray fog in the air. The entire space was gray. Zhuowen was in the middle of a cliff. Below him was the endless gray sea and there was nothing else. In the gray sea, he saw countless living beings struggling bitterly. An endless stream of wails resounded throughout the entire space. Pain, madness, ferocity, and all kinds of negative emotions filled the entire space. The sea of bitterness is boundless, there is no shore to turn back. Suddenly, directly below Zhuowen, an old voice faintly sounded. Zhuowen looked down and found that directly below the cliff, there was a boat with a black awning. A dim oil lamp hung at the bow of the boat, and there, a stooped old man was standing there. The old man wore a shabby bamboo hat and an inconspicuous straw raincoat. His hands were supporting him with a bamboo pole. Many drowning creatures around the black awning ship wailed in pain as they swam towards the black awning ship. The pitiful thing was that these creatures drowning in the sea of bitterness were ruthlessly swatted away by the old man's bamboo pole as soon as they approached the boat. Zhuowen frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "Who is it? This is the sea of bitterness?" "The sea of bitterness is boundless, there is no shore to turn back." The stooped old man lowered his head and did not look at Zhuowen. He only focused on swatting the creatures around the boat with the bamboo pole as he muttered to himself. Zhuowen's brows furrowed more and more. He could already confirm that this was the real sea of bitterness. Perhaps the real ruins should be in this space. This sea of bitterness is not a good place. If you rashly enter it, you might be trapped in the sea of bitterness forever like these creatures. Zhuowen carefully observed the drowning creatures in the sea of bitterness. There was no lack of cultivators with powerful auras, but these cultivators seemed to have completely lost their divine power and could not escape from the sea of bitterness. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the ship with a black awning. He knew that the drowning creatures in the sea of bitterness recklessly wanted to enter this boat. Obviously, this boat was the only tool that could pass through the sea of bitterness. If he wanted to pass through the sea of bitterness and reach the other side to see what was on the other side, he had to take this boat. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took a step forward and jumped from the cliff to the boat below. The stooped old man was still bent over with his head lowered. He used the bamboo pole to drive away the drowning creatures around him, but he turned a blind eye to Zhuowen. "Take me to the other side," Zhuowen said lightly. The stooped old man seemed to have just noticed Zhuowen and raised his head slightly. Zhuowen finally saw the old man's face, and his pupils shrank slightly. The old man's face was completely rotten. In his bloody and empty eyes, there were all kinds of maggots crawling there. It looked very horrifying. The sea of bitterness is boundless, there is no shore to turn back. The other side, where is the other side? The old man laughed cruelly, which made one's hair stand on end. The other side of this cliff. Zhuowen's expression was calm as he pointed at the gray sea opposite him, and said lightly. The old man stopped and raised his head again. He looked deeply at Zhuowen and laughed cruelly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Zhuowen said lightly. "I can send you over, but you have to pay." The old man laughed cruelly. "What do you want?" Zhuowen asked. "Your soul." The old man's eyes revealed a greedy light. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. This old man was too greedy. Wasn't he trying to take his life? Chapter 4562. If you can't afford it, then please go back. The old man saw Zhuowen hesitate and waved his hand, his voice cold and ruthless. "Of course I can afford it." Zhuowen's expression returned to calmness as he sneered. The old man raised his head and his rotten eyes looked at Zhuowen in surprise. "What? Is there a problem?" Zhuowen asked calmly. "Guessed straightforward." The old man nodded and then began to row the boat slowly with the bamboo pole in his hands. The boat gradually left the cliff and headed towards the depths of the Sea of Misery. The Sea of Misery was boundless and gray. The deeper they went into the Sea of Misery, the more creatures were drowning and struggling in the sea. The surrounding cries of pain were also more frequent, constantly filling Zhuowen's ears. Splash! When the black awning ship arrived, these creatures struggling in the sea of bitterness swarmed over, scrambling to gather towards the black awning ship. In the blink of an eye, the boat was completely surrounded. "Humph! What a bunch of stubborn trash!" The old man snorted coldly, his face expressionless. He raised the bamboo pole with both hands and suddenly waved it around. A terrifying yin-chi suddenly exploded. With the black awning boat as the center, terrifying ripples suddenly appeared on the bitter sea. Many creatures that were close to the black awning ship were sent flying by the powerful shockwave. There were even some weaker creatures that couldn't withstand the onslaught of the Yin-Chi and were directly crushed into dust. Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly. This strange old man's strength was really extraordinary. With the old man's intimidation, the surrounding creatures became obedient and no longer dared to casually approach the boat. The boat leisurely sailed deeper into the sea of misery. It seemed to be moving slowly, but in fact, it was extremely fast. Not knowing how long the boat sailed, Zhuowen found that the surrounding gray fog became thicker and his vision became extremely blurry. The speed of the black awning boat also slowed down. Zhuowen found that in the distance, in the hazy gray fog, a dim light flickered leisurely, as if guiding them there. "Guest, we're about to reach the other shore. Follow this light and we'll reach the other shore in 15 minutes. The old man suddenly stopped paddling, slowly turned around, and gloomily stared at Zhuowen. "Then why aren't you going over?" Zhuowen said calmly. "When this old man does business, I've always taken the money first before doing anything. Please pay." The old man's voice became more and more sinister. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He knew that the old man couldn't wait to collect his soul. "Guest, why are you still hesitating? Why aren't you handing over the reward to this old man?" The old man took a step forward and stretched out his right hand to grab Zhuowen. Only then did Zhuowen notice that there was no flesh on the old man's arms, only exposed bones. It looked very strange. Whoosh! The old man stretched out his right hand, creating a terrifying sound of wind breaking. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Zhuowen. His white finger bones pointed directly at Zhuowen's glabella. He wanted to penetrate into the depths of his soul and pull it out. Zhuowen looked at the old man expressionlessly. Suddenly, he found that the old man's body became stiff, and an extremely sinister force enveloped his body. Only then did he realize that countless pitch-black shadows had appeared on the black awning boat. These shadows were like curtains, covering the entire body of the black awning boat and forcibly pulling Zhuowen's shadow. "Are you trying to restrict my movements by controlling my shadow?" Zhuowen's gaze became serious, and his expression became extremely solemn. This old ferryman on the sea of bitterness was indeed not ordinary. Even he couldn't guard against such a strange method. Zhuowen didn't struggle, but looked on as the old man's right finger pointed at his glabella. A sinister force, like flowing water, entered the depths of his glabella and went deep into his soul. This gloomy and cold energy turned into a giant palm that could blot out the sun in the depths of his divine soul. It suddenly grabbed at the canopy of his divine soul. Rip! The sky above his soul was suddenly torn open by this huge hand. Zhuowen's face was ghastly pale, and cold sweat constantly flowed from his forehead. However, a fierce light burst out from the depths of his eyes. Just as the sinister hand was about to continue wreaking havoc on Zhuowen's soul, the two primordial trees hidden in the depths of Zhuowen's soul appeared. Surging purple energy light illuminated the entire soul world. The sinister hand that was about to continue wreaking havoc suddenly stopped when it sensed something strange. "This force doesn't belong to the 100 outer domains, no," the old man's terrified voice reverberated in Zhuowen's spiritual world. The gloomy hand retreated instead of advancing, quickly withdrawing from Zhuowen's spiritual world. "You've finally come in, don't go out." Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded in the soul world. Then, the two primordial stones suddenly swept out, blocking all the escape routes of the sinister hand. "No, what kind of force is this?" The old man's shrill voice became louder and louder. Dense green smoke rose from the sinister hand, as if it was being burned by some kind of fierce fire. Under the attack of the primordial stones, the sinister hand was like ice in the face of high temperature, and it was rapidly melting. Bang bang bang! The sinister hand was unwilling to be destroyed like this, and it began to struggle continuously. It attacked the two primordial stones, trying to blast them away. Unfortunately, the sinister hand melted even faster when it came into contact with the primordial stones. In less than 10 breaths, the sinister hand was completely annihilated, refined by the primordial stones, and turned into a wisp of pure soul power in Zhuowen's soul world. When Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, the old man was still in front of him, and his finger was pointed at his glabella. However, the old man's aura had completely disappeared. Zhuowen knew that the old man's soul had been refined by the primordial stones, and it nourished his own soul. The ferryman's soul is really powerful. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. After absorbing the ferryman's soul power, his soul had successfully broken through from the early stage to the mid-stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Moreover, he had also found some powerful soul power and some interesting memories from the ferryman's soul. I really didn't expect this sea of misery, Zhuowen muttered to himself, his eyes filled with complicated emotions. Crack, crack. Suddenly, countless cracks began to appear on the black awning boat under Zhuowen. It seems that this black awning boat is one with the ferryman. If the ferryman dies, the boat will be destroyed. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He picked up the bamboo pole that the ferryman had thrown on the boat, and he rowed the boat toward the opposite shore. He wanted to successfully cross to the opposite shore before the boat was destroyed. He knew from the ferryman's memories that the sea of misery was boundless, and there were many curses. Once one fell into the sea of misery, they would be possessed by the curse, and it would be difficult for them to escape from the sea of misery, and they would sink into pain forever. Chapter 45-63. Kacha. The black awning boat gradually disintegrated, and the stern of the boat directly collapsed, breaking into countless pieces of wood. And this disintegration spread to the bow of the boat at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen stood at the bow of the boat, holding the bamboo pole with both hands and rowing rapidly. The black awning boat was like a sharp arrow, rapidly sweeping toward the opposite shore. Whoosh! The black awning boat rapidly landed on the opposite shore, and finally the entire boat disintegrated completely, breaking into countless fine powder. Zhuowen leaped up and landed on the other side of the river. He looked around and found that there was a vast coastline in front of him, surrounded by black beaches. And the gray fog here was much thicker than that of the Sea of Misery, and his vision was limited to a few hundred meters. If it was before, Zhuowen might be like a headless fly, not knowing how to get out of this coastline. But now, he had no such worries. Because, after digesting part of the ferryman's memory, he completely knew this sea of misery and the surrounding world like the back of his hand. So this world is the prototype of a human law land world. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself. The great carefree realm was divided into 5 realms, namely calamity of heaven and earth, cosmic law, reverse ancient starlight, lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, and all techniques to one. Among them, all techniques to one was the peak of the great carefree realm, and was especially divided into human law land, earth law heaven, heaven law Tao, and Tao law without beginning. From the ferryman's memory, he knew that the owner of this ruin was called Tan Penghong, and came from the Abyss domain. The ferryman did not know Tan Penghong's identity in the Abyss domain. He only knew that Tan Penghong was a supreme expert who was half a step into the all techniques to one realm. Because Tan Penghong had not completely comprehended the essence of the human law land world, the human law land world formed by him was not complete, but had great drawbacks and shortcomings. And the huge world above the Sea of Misery was transformed from Tan Penghong's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The human law land world and the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth were intertwined, which was the main characteristic of the transformation of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth to all techniques to one. The lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts' lawful embodiment of heaven and earth world gradually transformed into a human embodiment of heaven and earth world. However, during this process of transformation, Tan Punghong had perished for some reason. As a result, the transformation process was interrupted, causing the two worlds to be independent yet interconnected. Due to the fact that both worlds were incomplete, Zhuo Wen and the others discovered that the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was deathly still when they entered it. This was the reason why. Due to the failure of the human law realm's transformation, it formed the hellish bitter sea realm. Zhuo Wen stood on the black beach and fell into deep thought. He even found some interesting memories in the ferryman's memories, and this memory was related to the realm's origin fragment. As the rumor had it, Tan Punghong's domain origin fragment was indeed stolen from the Abyss domain. Although it was only a small piece, it was of such a high grade that it had infinite benefits for any domain below the invincible domain. Although the invincible domain was only one grade higher than the superior domain, the difference between them could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. The energy of a small fragment of an invincible domain's origin fragment was probably equivalent to more than 1/3 of the total energy of a superior domain. This was also the main reason why the various kings of superior domains were scrambling to come to the ruins to compete for resources. In addition to these secret memory fragments, Zhuo Wen was more interested in the divine soul ability in the ferryman's mind. The ferryman's divine soul ability was extremely powerful, probably far stronger than that of an ordinary lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert. If Zhuo Wen had not possessed two primordial stones, no matter how powerful his divine soul was, it would have been sucked away by the ferryman's strange divine soul ability and become the ferryman's food. In the ferryman's memories, he found two complete divine soul abilities. These two divine soul abilities were the Boundless Bitter Sea Sutra and the Great Dark Heaven Handprint. The divine soul ability of the Boundless Bitter Sea Sutra could evolve a powerful divine soul into a boundless bitter sea. And in this great sea of bitterness, there were all kinds of endless wraiths and terrifying waves of the sea of bitterness. Each of them was aimed directly at the divine soul and could cause the divine soul to sink into the sea of bitterness, forever unable to break free. The Great Dark Heaven Handprint was a divine soul ability that was more direct in its attack method. It could evolve the divine soul into thousands of great handprints and directly tear the opponent's divine soul apart. The divine soul ability that the ferryman had used to seize Zhuo Wen's divine soul on the black awning boat was the Great Dark Heaven Handprint. The moment the great handprint entered Zhuo Wen's divine soul, a huge hole was torn in Zhuo Wen's divine soul world, causing him to suffer great damage. In addition, Zhuo Wen also had a better understanding of the Bitter Sea world, so he naturally knew how to leave this Bitter Sea world. However, he was not in a hurry to leave, because Tan Punghong's relic was hidden in the Bitter Sea world. As the ferryman's memory was incomplete, Zhuo Wen did not know the exact location of the relic. He only knew the approximate location. Summon Brother Duan and the others first. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuo Wen summoned Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoya. As soon as Duan Jipeng and the other two came out, they looked around with deep confusion in their eyes. Brother Zhuo, is this the world inside the secret passage? Duan Jipeng was the first to react and could not help but ask. Yes. This world is an incomplete human law land world, as the owner of the relic has not completely broken through. After Zhuo Wen briefly introduced the situation of the Bitter Sea world, Duan Jipeng and the other two finally came to a realization. A human law land world. The owner of this relic is actually half a step into the realm of all laws in one. How powerful! Duan Jipeng exclaimed. In other words, the relic is in this Bitter Sea world. We can go and find it now. Ziyang and Luoya said excitedly. Wait. Let me inform Family Headley and Senior Anshi first. With the two of them, we have a better chance, Zhuowen said in a low voice. As he spoke, Zhuowen took out the communication jade charm and sent a message to Li Yinglong and Elder Anshi. He was not in a hurry now. As far as he knew, it was not so easy to enter the Bitter Sea world. In other words, they should be the only people in this Bitter Sea world. Soon, Zhuowen received news from Li Yinglong and Elder Anshi that they were fine. Although Tanpenghong's law phenomenon world was getting stranger and stranger, Li Yinglong and Elder Anshi were both experts at the law phenomenon level, and their lives were not in danger. Family head Li and Senior Anshi are rushing here. We need to build a boat with black awning to meet them. Zhuowen looked at Duan Jipeng and the other two and said in a low voice. Duan Jipeng and the other two nodded. They had heard about the boat with black awning and the ferryman from Zhuowen. Therefore, they were not surprised by Zhuowen's words. Chapter 4564. The black awning boat was made from the unique life and death wood of the Sea of Bitterness. It was made with a special method, and the soul power of the boundless Sea of Bitterness was added to it. In other words, only ferrymen had the ability to make the black awning boat. The boundless Sea of Bitterness naturally had more than one ferryman, but none of them were easy to deal with. If Zhuowen had not inherited the ferryman's memories, he would probably have to find other ferrymen in this world to help Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong. But now, he was different. He had inherited the ferryman's memories and soul divine ability, so he could make his own black awning boat. Next, Zhuowen went deep into the Black Beach with Duan Jipeng and the others to look for the life and death wood. Behind the Black Beach was a black forest. It was pitch black, and there was not even a trace of light. It was strange and eerie. The moment Zhuowen and the others entered the Black Forest, they heard ear-piercing and strange howls. They are all evil spirits and ghosts. Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luo Yi revealed expressions of shock and fear. All of them urged the star god power in their bodies, causing their bodies to be suffused with blazing starlight, blocking all of the evil spirits and ghosts that were rushing over from the surroundings. Zhuowen strolled leisurely at the front, and all the evil spirits and ghosts that attacked from all directions were swiftly refined by him with a sweep of his sleeve. Duan Jipeng and the other two were not surprised. They knew that Zhuowen had a secret technique that could restrain evil spirits and ghosts. The group advanced into the depths of the forest at a moderate pace. Although there were more and more evil spirits and ghosts along the way, they could not cause any harm to Zhuowen and the others. This was because most of the evil spirits that got close to Zhuowen had been refined. The only ones that remained were those that were wary of Zhuowen's aura and had stayed far away from him, spying on him from afar. In the end, the group of four came to the extreme depths of the forest, and the surrounding black trees gradually turned into dead wood. These dead trees were of different shapes. Some looked like hand bones, some looked like leg bones, and some even looked like human skulls. They looked eerie, and coupled with the evil spirits and ghosts that were constantly howling around them, it was visually terrifying. At the same time, the evil spirits and ghosts here had also become more powerful. There were already rank evil ghosts here. However, rank evil ghosts did not have any effect on Zhuowen. He only took out the Taiyu sacred sword and slashed out, and many ghosts and evil spirits were destroyed one after another. After passing through the dead trees, the group came to a huge and empty wasteland. There was nothing around the wasteland, and only a twisted tree grew in the middle. The tree's left side was white, and the right side was black. The entire tree was like a coiling snake that kept twisting upwards. It looked complicated and strange. The surface of the tree was covered with snake-like scales, which shone with black and white light. This is the tree wood. Zhuowen pointed at the black and white trees in front of him and said with a smirk. The gazes of Duan Jipeng and the other two turned serious. They could sense an extremely strange aura from the life-death tree before them. This aura was both life and death, making it difficult for others to grasp. It is said that if an ordinary cultivator accidentally touches this tree wood, he will become a living dead with yin and yang intertwined. Life is worse than death, Zhuowen continued. Duan Jipeng's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, "Brother Zhuo, what should we do? Only those who have practiced the great mysterious heaven palm can touch this life and death tree. And I just happened to inherit this ability from the ferryman." Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the spot, took out array discs, and set up the eternal ultimate divine array nearby. At the same time, he took out the primordial stone, and it surrounded the eternal ultimate divine array, and began to rotate clockwise. After doing all this, Zhuowen handed the array flag to Duan Jipeng. "Brother Duan, Ziyang, Luoya, the three of you protect me for 3 days. I need to use these 3 days to cultivate the great dark heaven handprint and the boundless sea of bitterness sutra," Zhuowen instructed. Duan Jipeng took the array flag and nodded solemnly. He also knew that the construction of the black awning ship was inseparable from these two divine soul powers, but he was a little worried that Zhuowen could successfully cultivate these two profound divine soul powers in 3 days. This was also what Ziyang and Luoyao were thinking. Zhuowen naturally did not know what Duan Jipeng and the other two were thinking, because he was already sitting cross-legged on the ground, and began to comprehend the two divine soul powers. With the help of the primordial stone, his comprehension had reached an extremely terrifying level. He first began to comprehend the great dark heaven handprint, and it took him about a day and a night to completely comprehend it. The boundless sea of bitterness sutra was more profound, so it took him a day and a half to completely digest it. When Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, he found that Duan Jipeng and the other two were staring at him in disbelief. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Zhuowen stood up, looked at the strange expressions on Duan Jipeng and the other two's faces, and asked indifferently, "Master, are you done with your cultivation?" Ziyang asked carefully. "Yes. I have cultivated both the boundless sea of bitterness sutra and the great dark heaven handprint, and now I can pull out the life-death wood." With that, Zhuowen slowly walked out of the ancient ultimate divine array, and his right hand suddenly slapped out across the air. A terrifying spiritual energy surged out and finally manifested into an incomparably huge pale white handprint. The handprint pressed down and landed heavily on the life-death wood. Crack! The black and white life-death wood was directly torn apart and pulled over by the handprint. The moment the life-death wood was pulled down by Zhuowen, the surroundings suddenly became dead silent. The many ghosts and evil spirits that were originally surrounding the area suddenly stopped howling and stared at Zhuowen. Then, the evil spirits and ghosts that were originally afraid of Zhuowen began to madly rush towards Zhuowen, and began to attack him without any regard for their lives. Are these evil spirits and ghosts crazy? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. His right hand was still using the great dark heaven handprint to hold the life-death wood, and his left hand was holding the Taiyu sacred sword fiercely. Terrifying sword radiance exploded, and countless evil spirits and ghosts were destroyed by the sword radiance. However, even more evil spirits and ghosts rushed over crazily, as if they did not care about their lives. Boom! 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 At the same time, at the end of the wasteland there was a huge earthquake. Zhuowen could vaguely see that in the distance, there was a huge figure that was rushing towards them at an extremely fast speed. That is, a pre-stage ghost. The moment Zhuowen saw the huge figure in the distance, his heart sank. It was not the first time that he had encountered a pre-stage ghost. Previously, he was besieged by 5 pre-stage ghosts, so he was very familiar with its aura. The moment the gigantic figure appeared, he knew that it was a pre-level ghost. "Enter the macro world," Zhuowen shouted, and put away the ancient ultimate divine array. He also put Duan Jipeng and the other two into the macro world. Without saying anything, he quickly ran out of the black forest with the life-death wood. XDW8 Chapter 45-65. Boom, boom, boom. An earth-shattering tremor came from the depths of the vast black forest. The ground cracked apart, and numerous deep ravines that were like abysses extended out in all directions. Many black trees collapsed and sank into the depths of the ravines. Zhuowen used the dark heaven giant handprint with his right hand to carry the life-death wood and quickly retreated out of the black forest. He held the Taiyu sacred sword in his left hand and slashed out again and again. Blazing sword light exploded, and all of the evil spirits that surrounded him were all destroyed. This pre-grade ghost is so fast. Zhuowen looked behind him as he flew quickly and found that the huge figure was constantly closing the distance between them. Naturally, he also saw the true face of this pre-level ghost. This ghost was at least 1,000,000 feet long, and it seemed to be connected to the heavens and the earth. Its appearance was more like some kind of lizard, and its entire body was covered in pitch-black scales. It was completely different from the giant baby that Zhuowen had encountered before. It was on all fours and was extremely fast. It was like an unstoppable arrow. Roar! The ghost let out an earth-shattering roar and stomped on the ground with its thick feet. It jumped up and opened its bloody mouth to swallow Zhuowen. Zhuowen only felt that his body was covered by a huge black shadow. Then a smelly wind swept over. He did not even think about it. He swung the dark heaven giant handprint in his right hand forward and threw the life-death wood forward. He slashed out with the Taiyu sacred sword in his left hand. An extremely blazing sword light swept behind him and cut through the darkness of the entire forest. Clang! XDW-8 The Taiyu sacred sword collided with the ghost's cold sharp teeth and burst out countless sparks. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and could not help but fly backwards. That ghost was also forced back a few steps. Zhuowen took this opportunity to do a somersault in the air and landed firmly on the ground. This ghost really doesn't give up. If that's the case, then don't blame me. The moment Zhuowen landed on the ground, he pointed his right sword finger at his glabella. Powerful spiritual power gushed out and condensed into a sword shadow that was 1,000,000 feet long in front of him. This sword shadow emitted a mysterious purple light, and the surface of the sword was burning with scarlet flames. Above the flames, there was a strange black fog lingering. After Zhuowen's spirit reached the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, the power of his spirit sword intent reached an extremely terrifying level. This sword was more than enough to slay the ghost. Zhuowen bent his waist and gathered all the energy in his body. He focused it on his sword finger and pointed it out. Bang bang bang! 1,000,000 feet long sword shadow soared into the sky, slicing through the air and exploding continuously. Heaven and earth seemed to be torn apart by the sword shadow, and a huge gap of light appeared. The lizard-like ghost had just stabilized its body when it felt a strong sense of danger. It raised its head abruptly and saw the gigantic sword shadow descending from the sky. Countless black holes exploded in the surrounding air, and a hint of fear appeared in the depths of its eyes. Roar! The ghost roared at the sky and swung its huge claws at the sky. A terrifying power exploded, and the space was torn into pieces. Boom! The sword shadow and the huge claws collided, and a deafening explosion sounded. The explosion lasted for a long time. Zhuowen floated in the air with his hands behind his back. He looked down coldly at the ground where the giant ghost was struggling to resist the gigantic sword shadow. Die! He softly uttered the word, and it gently landed on the sword shadow. The sword shadow seemed to have the help of God. It pierced through the huge claws, pierced the ghost's body, and nailed it to the ground. The giant ghost wailed, and its 1,000,000 feet long body gradually dissipated. In the end, it disappeared completely. At the same time, many of the surrounding ghosts and evil spirits that were eyeing them covetously fled, no longer bothering Zhuowen. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the gigantic sword shadow turned into a wisp of golden light and returned to the glabella. After killing the giant ghost with a single sword strike, Zhuowen summoned Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoya from the macro world. Brother Zhuo, where is that ghost? Duan Jipeng looked around and found that the surrounding evil spirits were all hiding far away, and the giant ghost was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were full of doubt. I've already killed him, Zhuowen said indifferently. Duan Jipeng and the other two's pupils shrank. They knew how powerful the ghost was. It was comparable to an expert at the law phenomenon level. But now, such a powerful pre-level ghost was killed just like that. Let's go. Senior Anshi and the others should be here. We should go back and make the black awning boat. Zhuowen slowly walked out of the black forest with his hands behind his back. When he passed by the life and death wood, he grabbed the air with his right hand and used the Xiantian great handprint to hold it firmly behind him. When the group came to the strange black beach again, Zhuowen began to cut the life and death wood. He first hollowed out the central part of the life and death wood, then he began to carve the surface of the life and death wood with special lines. After about half an hour, the prototype of the black awning boat had been made. Then, Zhuowen began to recite the Boundless Sea of Bitterness Sutra. In the depths of his soul, lines of complicated and strange characters appeared. These characters were constantly rearranging and combining, forming a boundless sea of bitterness. This sea of bitterness was completely composed of these strange characters. Whoosh! The sea of bitterness formed by countless strange characters rushed out of Zhuowen's divine soul and landed on the black awning boat. These strange characters were attached to the surface of the black awning boat, constantly flashing with a faint gray light. The originally ordinary black awning boat seemed to have a life of its own, and it underwent earth-shaking changes. Not only did the black awning boat's appearance become more vivid and beautiful, but the black awning boat was also suspended in the air by itself, slowly rotating. It's a success! The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a smile. He jumped up and landed on the black awning boat. The black awning boat, which was originally suspended in the air, slowly landed in the sea of bitterness outside the beach. Brother Duan, Ziyang, Luoya, the three of you wait for me on the other side. I'm going to pick up Senior Anshi and the others. Zhuowen instructed Duan Jipeng and the other two. Then, he picked up the sail made of the life and death wood and gently rowed the black awning boat. At this moment, Zhuowen was wearing a bamboo hat and a straw raincoat. He was steering the black awning boat in the boundless sea of bitterness. From afar, he looked like a ferryman of life and death. Zhuowen took the bamboo hat and straw raincoat from the ferryman. These two things were made of special materials, which were particularly beneficial for the strengthening of the divine soul. In the boundless sea of bitterness, Zhuowen silently steered the black awning boat. During this period, he also met other ferrymen. These ferrymen were dressed in the same way as him, wearing bamboo hats and straw raincoat. Even if the ferrymen met, they turned a blind eye and did not communicate with each other. Soon, the black awning boat arrived at the cliff where Zhuowen had set off. When he had just arrived at the bottom of the cliff, he happened to see a black awning boat parked on the shore. On the shore of the cliff, there were many people gathered. When Zhuowen saw the leader, his pupils shrank. He could not help but lower his head and pull down his bamboo hat to cover his face. Chapter 4566. On the edge of the cliff, the leader of the group was a short and small child. The child's face was pale like a ghost's face, but his aura was very strong. Zhuowen was no stranger to this child. It was the ghost child. Behind the ghost child, Sakyamuni, Su Jiang, and Mi Haomiao followed silently. What made Zhuowen's face gloomy was that there were 4 figures following behind them. Zhuowen was no stranger to these 4 figures. They were Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, Li Ying, and Li Shuo. At this moment, the 4 of them were in a sorry state. Their mouths and noses were bleeding, and their bodies were bound by golden chains. Especially Elder Anshi, his aura was the weakest. His face was pale, and his arms were cut off, dripping with blood. The golden chains that bound Old Man Anshi had some kind of powerful suppressive power that suppressed his divine power. Otherwise, Elder Anshi's severed arms would have been regenerated by his own divine power. It seems that Elder Anshi met the ghost child and the others in the giant city. Zhuowen's heart sank. He instantly thought that after he entered the secret passage, Elder Anshi and the others must have been ambushed by the ghost child and the others. In other words, the one who contacted him just now was not Elder Anshi himself. Thinking of this, Zhuowen gently raised his head. Under the bamboo hat, a pair of gloomy eyes could be seen. He looked at the ghost child on the shore. Sure enough, he saw Elder Anshi's communication jade token on the ghost child's waist. Zhuowen stealthily hid his communication jade talisman and quietly approached the shore. At this moment, the ferryman on the other boat with black awning on the shore glanced indifferently at Zhuowen, who was on the shore, but he did not say anything. The ghost child and the others came to the first black awning boat. He looked at the ferryman expressionlessly and said, "The 8 of us need to cross to the other side. The sea of bitterness is boundless, and there is no shore to turn back. Passengers, you have to pay the fare." The ferryman lowered his head and said in a gloomy voice, like an owl at night. It was frightening. The ghost child raised his eyebrows and asked indifferently, "What fare do you need?" The ferryman sneered and continued, "Souls. 1 soul for 1 ticket." Sakyamuni's eyes darkened. He looked coldly at the ferryman and said, "Are you trying to kill us? You really paid a hefty price for this ticket. If you can't afford it, you have to cross the sea of bitterness." The ferryman said indifferently, "The 4 of us will cross the sea of bitterness." Sea. Ghost Child suddenly pointed at the 4 people behind him and asked in a deep voice. Old Man Anshi and the others were shocked. They didn't expect Ghost Child to hand over their souls. Old Man Anshi looked at Sakyamuni and asked coldly. Sakyamuni said leisurely, "Anshi, no one will know if you die in the ruins. I just need to report a random reason and I can get away with it." When he spoke up to hear, the ridicule on the corners of Sakra's mouth grew thicker, and he continued. "Moreover, even if I kill you, with my master here, who in the primeval Heavenly Tao Academy can touch me? I am a genius, and you are just an outer elder. Compared to me, you are insignificant." Old Man Anshi trembled with anger, and a trace of despair appeared in his heart. He already understood that Sakyamuni wanted to kill him, and he could not escape death this time. The ferryman was silent for a moment, then shook his head and said indifferently, "The ticket must be your soul. If you can't do it, don't get on my boat." The ghost child and the others' faces changed slightly. They thought that the ferryman really did not know what was good for him. "Are you looking for death? Today, you have to cross even if you don't want to." Sakyamuni's body emitted a blazing golden light. His right palm blasted out across the air, forming a huge golden handprint that pressed down on the ferryman. The ferryman sneered and flicked the bamboo poles in his hands. The black water of the Sea of Bitterness exploded into dozens of water pillars and blasted toward the golden handprint. The golden handprint was immediately blasted into pieces by the water pillars of the Sea of Bitterness. The black water pillars did not lose momentum and blasted toward Sakyamuni. Sakyamuni's eyes narrowed. He clenched his right hand into a fist, took a step forward, and punched out fiercely. Countless explosions sounded in the air. The water pillars in front of him were all smashed by him. The terrifying fist rushed out like the sun and blasted toward the ferryman. The ferryman snorted and waved the bamboo pole in the sea. The boat turned into a shadow and disappeared from the shore, sinking into the depths of the Sea of Bitterness. Bang! 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 At the same time, the sun-like fist landed in the sea and split the water in front of him in half. It formed a huge gully in the water that extended for hundreds of thousands of feet. It was a spectacular sight. Su Jiang, Mei Haomiao, and the others were shocked when they saw Sakyamuni's move. Sakyamuni's strength was beyond their expectations. Zhuowen also looked at Sakyamuni in surprise. He thought that Sakyamuni's strength was indeed not simple. The ferryman of the Sea of Bitterness is really difficult to deal with. Sakyamuni frowned and muttered to himself. He was not a fool. When he arrived here and saw the many powerful creatures struggling in the Sea of Bitterness, he knew that he could not enter the Sea of Bitterness casually. Only the ferryman's boat could cross the Sea of Bitterness and reach the shore. Otherwise, one would be trapped in the Sea of Bitterness forever, unable to extricate themselves. Nephew Shirtian, there's a boat with a black awning on the shore. Perhaps the ferryman will accept us. Ghost Child came to Sakyamuni's side and pointed at the boat with a black awning not far from the shore. This boat with a black awning was naturally Zhuowen's boat. When Ghost Child and the others came to the front of the boat with a black awning, Zhuowen lowered his head slightly, making it difficult to see his face. We're going to cross the shore. What's the price? Ghost Child asked. Souls. Zhuowen deliberately lowered his voice and asked. Ghost Child and the others' hearts sank. Sakyamuni snorted and said, Must we have our own souls? That's not necessary. I'll also accept other people's souls. Zhuowen continued to lower his voice as he mocked with a sneer. Ghost Child and Sakyamuni, who had lost hope, suddenly had their eyes lit up. Are you serious? Sakyamuni asked. Of course, if you don't believe me, then leave. Zhuowen still sneered. We believe you. There are 4 of us, and the souls of the other 4 will be given to you as our payment for the ferry. How about it? Ghost Child smiled and pointed at the 4 people behind him. Okay. Please board the boat. Zhuowen nodded and made a gesture of invitation. Only then did the brows of Ghost Child, Sakra Shirtian and the rest relax as they entered the black awning boat one after another. Old Man Anshi and the others cursed loudly, but no matter how angry they were, they still couldn't change their fate of being sold. Ghost Child pulled the 4 people with his right hand and forcibly pulled them onto the boat. These 4 people are now mine. Leave them to me. After Ghost Child forcibly pulled Old Man Anshi and the others onto the boat, Zhuowen reached out and grabbed the chain on Ghost Child's hand, and said in a low voice. Ghost Child frowned slightly and didn't think much about it. He handed the chain to Zhuowen. After Zhuowen took the chain from Ghost Child, he waved his sleeve and quietly put the 4 people into the great world. He held the bamboo pole with both hands and leisurely rowed the boat toward the depths of the bitter sea. Chapter 45-67. The Sea of Bitterness was boundless, and spilled water could not be retrieved. In the boundless Sea of Bitterness, the black awning boat moved forward leisurely, forming a sharp contrast with the surrounding creatures struggling in the Sea of Bitterness. Save me! Please save me! As the black awning boat moved forward, countless creatures struggled to get close, trying to climb onto the boat. Zhuowen's expression was indifferent as he quickly swung the oars in his hand, slapping down all the creatures trying to climb onto the boat. How long will it take to reach the other side? Sakyamuni sat at the bow of the boat and looked around, only to find that they were still surrounded by the Sea of Bitterness. He frowned and asked in a low voice, The Sea of Bitterness is boundless. How can it be so easy to cross it? Zhuowen replied indifferently, holding the oars with both hands and rowing fiercely. The black awning boat shot forward like an arrow. Sakyamuni looked deeply at the ferryman at the stern. For some reason, this ferryman gave him a sense of familiarity. Especially the ferryman's tone, there was a sense of familiarity. Have we met before? Sakyamuni suddenly asked again. The ferryman at the stern suddenly stopped rowing and lowered his head to look at Sakyamuni. Dear guest, why do you ask? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Because of my intuition. Sakyamuni replied indifferently. If the guest says so, then so be it. Zhuowen grinned and slowly raised his head, meeting eyes with Sakyamuni at the bow of the boat. At this moment, Sakyamuni's pupils shrank, and a violent aura erupted from his body. The ghost child and the others seemed to have sensed something and looked at the stern of the boat. The moment they saw Zhuowen, their pupils narrowed into needles, and their auras erupted. Zhuowen, how could it be you? The ghost child's eyes were gloomy as he stared at Zhuowen, disbelief in the depths of his eyes. Ferrymen were special creatures born from the bitter sea world. Why did Zhuowen become a ferryman? Zhuowen looked straight at them and said indifferently, "I'm here to send you on your way." With that, he stomped the ground with his right foot, and the black awning boat suddenly flew hundreds of meters high, and then suddenly flipped over. Inside the boat, Sakyamuni, Ghost Child, and the others all fell out of the boat. Zhuowen landed steadily on the bitter sea with the black awning boat. He held the bamboo pole with both hands, and with a sudden push, the black awning boat immediately turned into a black shadow, disappearing from the spot. Plop! Sakyamuni, Ghost Child, Su Jiaying, and Mi Haomiao all fell into the sea of misery. Damn it, we were tricked by Zhuowen. Sakyamuni was so angry that his whole body trembled. He gathered all his divine power and wanted to fly up and leave the sea of misery. However, the sea of misery had some mysterious power. As soon as he flew up, he was forcefully pulled down by this mysterious power. Not only Sakyamuni, but also Ghost Child, Su Jiaying, and Mi Haomiao. As soon as they gathered their divine power, they were forcefully pulled down by the power of the sea of misery. They tried again and again several times, but they all failed. This sea of misery is not simple. Our divine power is useless here, and the more we struggle, the more we sink. Su Jiaying's eyes were filled with fear. He kept gathering his divine power, but it was all in vain. He could not help but look at the Ghost Child and Sakyamuni. The Ghost Child's eyes were gloomy, and a helpless expression appeared on his face. This sea of misery was too strange, and he had no way to solve it. Shirtian, do you have any ideas? The Ghost Child could only ask Sakyamuni for help. Although he was Sakyamuni's senior, the latter was still the disciple of Master Ji Yuansheng. He was much more knowledgeable and had more tricks up his sleeve. Sakyamuni's eyes were gloomy, and his heart was filled with anger. He did not expect that in the end, he would still be tricked by Zhuowen, and in such a ruthless way. Zhuowen, just you wait, I will make you pay a heavy price. Sakyamuni roared in his heart, and then took out a scroll. If I'm not wrong, this sea of misery should be a mutated version of the world of cultivation. Master once told me about this situation. In order to cross this sea of misery, other than the ferryman's black awning boat, the only way is to step on the bodies of the countless living beings in this sea of misery. Sakyamuni's expression was ugly as he spoke to the Ghost Child. The living beings in the sea of misery? The Ghost Child could not help but look around. He did see countless living beings struggling here. However, these living beings were too scattered, and they could not even leave the surface of the sea of misery. How could they step on these living beings' bodies and leave? That is to kill them. Step on their bodies. The only thing I can use is this 100 ghosts portrait that Master gave me. As Sakyamuni spoke, his hands formed a seal, and the 100 ghosts portrait above his head immediately burst out with ear-piercing and strange howls. Many ghosts and evil spirits that had been subdued by the 100 ghosts portrait rushed out like dark clouds, and pounced on the living beings struggling around the sea of misery. Why are there ghosts in the sea of misery? Ah no! Help! I can't use my divine abilities in the sea of misery, and I can't resist these ghosts, don't kill me. However, when the ghosts appeared above the sea of misery, the living beings struggling in the sea of misery screamed in horror and swam away from the ghost. Unfortunately, the ghosts were much faster than them, and they quickly pounced on them, sucking their yang energy clean. The living beings struggling in the sea of misery were quickly sucked dry, and they all floated on the surface of the sea of misery. These corpses that had been sucked dry by the ghosts were controlled by Sakyamuni using the 100 Ghosts portrait. They lined up in a straight line and swam towards the opposite shore. Sakyamuni ordered 2 ghosts to lift him up from the sea of misery, and he landed steadily on a dried corpse. Immediately after, the other ghosts lifted the ghost child, Su Jiaying, and Mi Haomiao up and landed on the other dried corpses. "Let's go. Follow me." Sakyamuni looked at the ghost child and the other 2 behind him, who still had a lingering fear in their hearts. With his hands behind his back, he quickly rushed forward. The ghost child and the other 2 followed closely behind, their eyes full of resentment. Because of Zhuowen, they had almost sunk into the sea of misery forever. At this moment, the killing intent in their hearts towards Zhuowen was almost tangible. At this moment, Zhuowen drove the boat to the opposite shore and landed on the black beach. Duan Jipeng, Ziyang, and Luoya, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly greeted him. "Brother Zhuo, have you brought Senior Anshi and the others here?" Duan Jipeng hurriedly asked. Zhuowen nodded and waved his sleeve, summoning Elder Anshi and the other 3 from the Great World. "What the hell is going on?" Duan Jipeng and the other 2 couldn't help but be stunned when they saw Elder Anshi, Li Yinglong, and the other 2 covered in wounds. Especially when they saw the dazzling golden chains that bound the 4 of them, their gazes turned solemn. Chapter 4568. As soon as I reached the other side, I saw Ghost Child and the others. Senior Anshi and the others had already been captured by them. Zhuowen said lightly. Old Man Anshi and the other 3 heaved a sigh of relief when they realized it was Zhuowen. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, thank you for saving our lives." Old Man Anshi hurriedly bowed to Zhuowen and said sincerely. Li Yinglong, Li Ying, and Li Shua also bowed to Zhuowen from afar to express their sincere gratitude. "It's okay. After all, we are companions. Let me unlock the shackles on you first." As Zhuowen spoke, he took out the High Abyss Saint's sword and slashed out. With a dull sound of metal clashing against metal, the golden chains binding Old Man Anshi and the others broke apart. After regaining his freedom, Old Man Anshi looked at Zhuowen and asked, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, where are Ghost Child and the others?" "I threw them all into the sea of bitterness. No matter how strong they are, they can't break free from the sea of bitterness. They will be trapped in it forever," Zhuowen said lightly. Old Man Anshi and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Although they knew little about the sea of bitterness, they knew that it was powerful and strange. No matter how strong Ghost Child and Sakyamuni were, once they fell into the sea of bitterness, they might not be able to get up. "Have you contacted Senior Guan and the others?" Zhuowen looked at Old Man Anshi and asked. After he contacted Old Man Anshi and the others, Zhuowen deliberately reminded them to contact Guan Yihan and the others in the giant city. He asked Guan Yihan and the others to come to the giant city first and then enter the sea of bitterness together. "We did contact them, but Void King and Dark Thunder King didn't reply to me. Later, when we were waiting in the giant city, we met Ghost Child and the others." Old Man Anshi smiled bitterly, his voice full of helplessness. Zhuowen didn't need Old Man Anshi to tell him. After Old Man Anshi and the others met Ghost Child and the others, they must have been severely injured and became captive. "I'm afraid Senior Guan and the others have found other entrances," Zhuowen thought to himself. "Are there other entrances to the Sea of Bitterness?" Old Man Anshi asked in surprise. "Yes, because there is more than one ferryman in the Sea of Bitterness. If there is only one entrance, there is no need for so many ferrymen," Zhuowen said calmly. Old Man Anshi nodded. They felt that Zhuowen's guess was reasonable. "What should we do next?" Old Man Anshi asked Zhuowen. "Explore this world. The relic is somewhere here," Zhuowen said in a low voice. Once these words were spoken, No one objected. Next, Zhuowen led everyone into the depths of the Black Beach. He had obtained part of the ferryman's memory, so he knew much more about this world than the others. Therefore, he had analyzed it during this period of time and chose several places where the relics were most likely to appear. Not long after Zhuowen left, in front of the Black Beach, a group of 4 people quickly ran over the sea. If one looked carefully, these 4 people were actually stepping on many dried corpses, quickly rushing over. The person in the lead was a young man with a golden vertical mark between his eyebrows. Above his head, a ghostly scroll floated. The group of 4 was Sakyamuni and Ghost Child. They used the 100 Ghosts portrait to slaughter innocent creatures struggling in the sea of bitterness along the way. They stepped on the corpses of these creatures all the way through the sea of bitterness and arrived at the other side. As soon as Sakyamuni landed on the Black Beach, his cold eyes swept around. When he didn't find Zhuowen's figure, he snorted coldly, his eyes filled with displeasure. A ship is coming. Ghost Child turned his head abruptly and looked at the sea in the southwest direction. Under the hazy gray fog, the shadow of a black awning ship was rapidly approaching. When the black awning ship docked at the shore, a man in blood-red clothes stood at the bow of the ship and slowly walked out. The ferryman of the black awning ship nodded at the man in blood-red clothes and lightly floated away. Blood-robe King Xuefeng. The moment Ghost Child saw the man in blood-red clothes, his eyes couldn't help but squint as he said indifferently. Of course, Blood-robe King also saw Ghost Child and the others. A faint smile appeared on his pale face. Ice Ghost King, Ghost Child, long time no see. Blood-robe King Xuefeng slowly walked up and stopped when he was dozens of meters away from Ghost Child and the others. Ghost Child looked at Xuefeng strangely and said, "How did you take the black awning ship to the other side? Didn't you say that you need to pay the fare with your own soul?" Xuefeng said indifferently, I have as many souls as I want. As long as I give the ferryman enough souls, why would he still want my soul?" Ghost Child's eyes turned cold and said, "I forgot about your hobby. In terms of souls, you might be better than the ferryman." Xuefeng smiled slightly and waved his sleeve. The experts of the Blood-Thorn realm hidden in his celestial phenomenon world appeared one after another and landed on the Black Beach. Ice Ghost King, do you have any clues about the ruins? Also, where is this place? Xuefeng looked at Ghost Child and asked in an indifferent tone. This is the celestial phenomenon world of the ruins owner, and the ruins should be in this world. Blood-robe King, are you interested in joining forces with us to explore? Ghost Child looked at Xuefeng and invited him with a smile. Xuefeng's strength was very strong and was not inferior to Ghost Child at all. Therefore, Ghost Child wanted to join forces with Xuefeng and have more confidence in exploring the ruins this time. Blood-robe King Xuefeng sneered and said, "I, Xuefeng, am used to being alone and will not do something like joining forces." Chapter 4569. The speed of Zhuo Wen's group was extremely fast. They quickly passed through the Black Forest and arrived at a boundless desert. The Sea of Misery was vast and had many terrains. This desert took up 1/20th of the entire world and could be considered the third largest terrain in this world. Zhuowen had 3 main suspects. They were the Black Desert, the 9-layered Sky Island, and the Sea of Misery. The Sea of Misery was the largest terrain in this world. It took up almost 4/5 of the entire world. However, it was precisely because it was too vast and because it was the Sea of Misery's uniqueness that Zhuo had a headache. He hoped that the ruins were not in the Sea of Misery. Otherwise, he would not know how to enter the Sea of Misery to find the ruins. Therefore, he planned to explore the Black Desert and the 9-layered Sky Island. If he could find the ruins in these 2 places, he would not have to enter the Sea of Misery. 9 black suns hung in the sky above the Black Desert. Surprisingly, the 9 black suns emitted a cold air. The entire black desert was shrouded in darkness and coldness. When Zhuowen and the others entered the black desert, they could not help but shiver. The coldness in the black desert was not physical. It was a coldness that penetrated deep into the soul. So cold! So cold! Li Ying and Li Shuo shivered and fell to the ground. Their bodies were curled up and their faces were pale. Their auras were rapidly weakening. They were like candles in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. Zhuowen placed his right hand on their pulse. He found that their body temperature and pulse were normal. However, their life force was still disappearing bit by bit. Their souls are drying up. The 9 black suns in the black desert are too terrifying. Duan Jipeng walked over. His face was also extremely pale. However, he was much better than Li Shuo and Li Ying. Ziyang and Luo Ye were the same. Their bodies were shivering. However, it was not to the extent of Li Ying and Li Shuo. Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong were in the best condition. Although they did not look too good, they could still hold on. Li Shuo and Li Ying are too weak. If they stay in the black desert for too long, their lives will be in danger. Zhuowen retracted his right hand, looked at Li Yinglong and said, "Family leader Li, keep them in your lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Use your lawful embodiment of heaven and earth to protect them." Li Yinglong nodded, then flicked his sleeve and sent Li Ying and Li Shuo into the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Brother Duan, Ziyang, Luo Ye, the 3 of you should enter the outside world as well. This black desert will be even more dangerous. Zhuowen looked at Duan Jipeng and the other 2 and said seriously. Duan Jipeng and the other 2 didn't refuse. They also knew that with their strength, if they followed Zhuowen's group, they would only be a burden to the latter. Chapter 4570. The 2 of you, did you also cross the Sea of Misery on the ferryman's boat? Li Yinglong asked. Guan Yihan and Gong Xuekuan looked at each other, puzzled. We didn't come from the Sea of Misery. Instead, we came to the Black Desert through a secret passage. We walked out of the Black Desert and came here. Then, we met you. Guan Yihan said. Zhuowen suddenly understood. It seemed that not everyone who entered the Sea of Misery would appear on the other side. There were also passages that led directly to the other side. That black desert is too strange. When only one of the 9 black suns was left, countless ghosts appeared. Among them, there were even pre-level ghosts. We lost a lot of men there. Gong Xuekuan said with a gloomy face. The 2 of you, did you find any clues there? Zhuowen looked at Guan Yihan and Gong Xuekuan and asked. Guan Yihan thought for a moment, then took out a stone slab and handed it to Zhuowen. We found this stone slab on a pregrade ghost. The moment Zhuowen took the stone slab, his pupils shrank. This stone slab, be it the shape or the material, was exactly the same as the one Zhuowen had. The only difference was that the array pattern in the center of the stone slab that Guan Yihan had given him was completely different from the one that Zhuowen had. Zhuo Xiaoyu, is there a problem? Guan Yihan saw the strange look on Zhuowen's face and could not help but ask. Zhuowen did not answer. Instead, he took out another stone slab. You have one too? Guan Yihan saw the other stone slab in Zhuowen's hand and his eyes lit up. Yes, I got this stone slab from the 9-level Sky Island. The array on it is too mysterious. I can't understand it. Zhuowen returned Guan Yihan's stone slab and frowned slightly. Since both you and I have found similar stone slabs, does it mean that this stone slab is related to the ruins? Guan Yihan asked. There should be a huge relationship, and I suspect that there should be a total of 3 stone slabs. We have 2 pieces, and the 3rd piece is very likely to be in the Sea of Bitterness. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the boundless Sea of Misery under the gray fog, and his eyes flickered. Sea of Bitterness? Are you saying that you want to search for the third slate in the Sea of Misery? Guan Yihan and Gong Xuequan's expressions changed slightly. Although they had not experienced the Sea of Bitterness, they could tell that it was not a good place. Especially when they saw the many living beings struggling and drowning in the Sea of Bitterness, they were filled with fear towards the Sea of Bitterness. Yes, the Sea of Misery, the 9-layered Sky Island, and the Black Desert are the largest landforms in this world. Since the Black Desert and the 9-level Sky Island have this special stone slab, it means that the Misery Sea must also have 1 or 2 pieces. Zhuowen's expression was full of seriousness. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his guess was correct. But the Sea of Bitterness is boundless. Once you enter, there is no turning back. Zhi Elder Anshi and Li Yinglong hurriedly came out to dissuade him. They felt that if Zhuowen entered the Sea of Bitterness, there would be no return. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Moreover, I have the black awning boat. I won't have any problems in the Sea of Bitterness. Zhuowen smiled slightly and took out the black awning boat from the great world. He put on a straw raincoat and a bamboo hat, and stepped onto the boat. But how are you going to enter the Sea of Bitterness? That stone slab can't be floating on the surface of the sea. It must be at the bottom of the sea. Elder Anshi said worriedly. I have my ways. After Zhuowen finished speaking, he propped up the bamboo pole with both hands, and the black awning boat shot out like an arrow. Zhuowen cultivated the boundless Sea of Bitterness, and his spirit could never sink into the Sea of Bitterness. Therefore, he could enter the Sea of Bitterness without being affected by it. Zhuo, can you really find it? Guan Yihan looked at the black awning boat in the distance and frowned slightly. He was slightly worried. We can only believe in Zhuo, Elder Anshi said with a wry smile. Whoosh! The black awning boat swept past in an instant, stirring up high waves. The creatures in the Sea of Bitterness were thrown away by the turbulence. Zhuowen chose a secluded sea area and stopped the black awning boat. With a wave of his sleeve, he threw out several array discs and set up powerful array restrictions around the black awning boat. After setting up several restriction grand arrays, Zhuowen finally set his mind at ease. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the boat and recited the incantation of the boundless Sea of Bitterness. A ripple of golden light surged out from between his eyebrows, and then Zhuowen's spirit came out from between his eyebrows. Upon closer inspection, Zhuowen's spirit was a miniature version of Zhuowen. It was only about the size of a palm, small and exquisite. I hope the Sea of Bitterness can protect my spirit, the little person muttered to himself, reciting the incantation of the boundless Sea of Bitterness. Black characters rushed out like chains and surrounded the little person of Zhuowen. The little person of the spirit walked out of the boat, jumped up, and dived into the Sea of Bitterness with a plop. The speed of the spirit was many times faster than the body. As soon as the little person of the spirit entered the Sea of Bitterness, it rushed into the depths of the Sea of Bitterness as if it had teleported. In less than half an hour, the little person of the spirit had dived to the bottom of the Sea of Bitterness. There were many black shadows in the Sea of Bitterness. These black shadows were not faster than the little person of the spirit. In the depths of the Sea of Misery, countless black shadows let out a series of roars as they scrambled to chase after Zhuowen. In an instant, the entire depths of the Sea of Bitterness was filled with demons and ghosts. It was extremely strange. Boom! Not long after Zhuowen's divine soul avatar flew out, it was immediately intercepted by a black shadow. This black shadow was very long, like a flood dragon. It swung its huge tail fiercely, sending Zhuowen's divine soul avatar flying back dozens of meters. As Zhuowen retreated, he completely fell into the encirclement of countless black shadows. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. Without thinking, he released his divine soul sword essence to surround his body. Streaks of divine soul sword shadows emitted a chilling light as they resisted the onslaught of the terrifying black shadows rolling in from all directions. However, there were too many black shadows and their attacks were too terrifying. The sword shadows that surrounded Zhuowen were gradually broken. Zhuowen knew that if this continued, he would definitely be engulfed by the black shadows and his divine soul would be destroyed in the sea of misery. Moreover, Zhuowen also found that his divine power was useless against the black shadows. This meant that the black shadows in the sea of misery were not ghosts or evil spirits. Bang! 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 The number of divine soul sword essences around Zhuowen decreased, and were about to be completely destroyed. Rip! A huge claw tore through the divine soul sword essence defense and grabbed Zhuowen's divine soul avatar. The divine soul avatar reacted quickly and dodged immediately. However, it was still grazed by the huge claw and its abdomen was torn open. Zhuowen frowned slightly. His divine soul was slightly injured. Swoosh! Swoosh! The attacks of the black shadows became more and more intense. The divine soul sword essence defense around Zhuowen was completely torn apart. Zhuowen's divine soul avatar was completely exposed to the numerous black shadows. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he took out the primordial stone in his divine soul. The numerous black shadows that were about to launch a fatal attack on the divine soul avatar slowed down after feeling the power of the primordial stone. Then, Zhuowen was surprised to find that the black shadows kept away from the divine soul avatar and did not dare to approach it. It seems that these strange black shadows are afraid of the aura of the primordial stone. Zhuowen breathed a sigh of relief and controlled the two primordial stones to revolve around his body. His divine soul avatar shot toward the surface of the sea of misery like a sharp arrow. Many black shadows followed behind the divine soul avatar but did not dare to attack again until Zhuowen left the sea of misery and swept out of the sea surface. Chapter 45-72. Whoosh! The black awning boat was extremely fast and appeared on the shore in an instant. After Zhuowen put away the boat, he jumped off the shore and walked to Guanihan and the others. Zhuo Xiaoyu, what's the result? Guanihan asked with a burning gaze. Zhuowen smiled and said, I didn't disappoint you. I found the third stone slab in the depths of the bitter sea. Guanihan and the others were overjoyed. This meant that they had a high chance of being the first to find the ruins. Senior Guan, give me your stone slab too. Zhuowen took out the two stone slabs and placed them on the ground as he said to Guanihan. Guanihan did not hesitate and directly took out the stone slabs and handed them to Zhuowen. Zhuowen arranged the three stone slabs in a straight line and saw some changes in the originally ordinary stone slabs. The strange pattern in the center of the three stone slabs emitted a blazing white light. The white light was like a torch and instantly soared into the sky, turning into 3 pillars of light. These 3 pillars of light were not conspicuous and did not attract anyone's attention in the misty bitter sea. Zhuowen saw the 3 pillars of light fuse together and turn into a white ray of light. With a whoosh, it shot out and rushed into the bitter sea. What's the meaning of this? Guanihan, Elder Anshi, and the others looked at this scene in a daze, somewhat confused. Zhuowen's eyes were bright, but he did not answer. Instead, he stared straight at the center of the bitter sea. There, countless waves of water splashed out and a huge bulge appeared on the calm surface of the bitter sea. Countless amounts of bitter sea's water were escaping in all directions. Moreover, this bulge was getting bigger and bigger, as if some extremely huge monster was slowly rising from the bottom of the sea. What is this thing? Guanihan's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the center of the bitter sea. Elder Anshi and the others also did not know what was going on and looked puzzled. Finally, everyone saw the bulge piercing the sea surface and revealing its original appearance. It's some kind of building. Guan Yihan's pupils shrank as he muttered to himself. The first thing that came out of the sea was the roof of a building. Just the top alone took up 1/10 of the Sea of Misery. It could be seen how huge this building was. When the entire building completely emerged from the sea, Zhuowen, Guan Yihan, and the others were all shocked. It was a huge fortress with a triangular shape. The entire fortress was made of some kind of divine stone that emitted a green light. Crash! The seawater that had accumulated on the surface of the fortress poured down and landed on the surface of the Sea of Bitterness, creating waves that were thousands of feet high. Chapter 45-74. No need to be so courteous. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja smiled as his eyes fell on Sakyamuni. He chuckled and said, "You must be Sakyamuni. It's an honor for you and the entire alternate ghost realm to be valued by Master Yuanxing. I'm afraid you'll surpass the 3 kings of the alternate ghost clan in the future. There's hope for the rise of the alternate ghost realm." The ghost child's heart trembled as he hurriedly said, "Dharmaraja, you must be joking. Our alternate ghost realm is still far from the divine spark realm. Sure Tian isn't that useful." Golden Lamp Dharmaraja looked deeply at the ghost child and said, "Is that so? Then it seems that I've worried too much." With that, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja led his subordinates and strode into the giant bronze door. Sakyamuni looked at Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's back as he left. His eyes narrowed slightly as he said coldly, "That old man wanted to kill me just now." The ghost child said with a wry smile, "A tall tree attracts the wind. Sure Tian, you don't know how famous you are now. Even the Dharmaraja of the Divine Spark Realm has noticed you and sees you as a threat to the rise of the alternate ghost realm." The Divine Spark Realm had been the #1 super realm for so long. Naturally, they would not allow the second place to surpass them so easily. Naturally, they would find ways to suppress them. Now that they saw Sakyamuni's great potential, they would naturally find ways to erase a genius like Sakyamuni and cut off the path of the alternate ghost clan. "Humph! This old fogey can't kill me." Sakyamuni sneered and strode into the giant bronze door. The ghost child opened his mouth but did not say anything in the end. He knew very well that Sakyamuni might not listen to him now. He couldn't see anything clearly in the pitch-black tunnel. Zhuowen and the others walked through the passage as if there was no end. "It seems that I've underestimated Sakyamuni. I thought that by sending them into the Sea of Bitterness, they would sink forever. I didn't expect them to escape from the Sea of Bitterness." Zhuowen secretly muttered to himself in his heart as a trace of dread appeared in his eyes towards Sakura. "This passageway is unusual. Walking in it, it feels as if time is flowing backwards. Look, there's light ahead." Guan Yihan, who was walking at the front, suddenly said to the people behind him. Everyone raised their heads and looked over. Sure enough, they saw a white light at the very front. They quickened their pace and walked out of the passage and entered. What appeared to for them was a vast expanse of starlight. Bright stars. In this part of the starry sky, there were broken continents floating one after another. These continents seemed to have been destroyed by some kind of terrifying battle. Almost all of them were in ruins and none of them were intact. This might be the true relic we're looking for. There are so many fragments of continents. Could it be that the treasures of the relic and the fragments of the origin of domains are all in some broken path in this starry sky? Gong Xuekuan frowned slightly. To Lamp Dharmaraja. Zhuo Xiaoyu, Brother Guan. It's not convenient for us to move together. We'll separate from you first. Gong Xuequan suddenly cupped his fists and apologized to Zhuowen and Guanyihan. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He glanced at Gong Xuequan and did not say anything. Instead, he looked at Guanyihan. Brother Gong is right. There's no need to move together here. You guys go first, Guanyihan said. Gong Xuequan nodded and led the team from the Dark Thunder Realm. They turned into a stream of light and disappeared in a direction. Zhuo Xiaoyu, let's move separately. If we can find the ruins, we'll send a signal. Guanyihan smiled at Zhuowen and said. Zhuowen took a deep look at Guanyihan and said, since Senior Guan said so, we'll do as you say. Let's move separately. Guanyihan nodded and cupped his fists at Zhuowen. Then, he left with the King of Hell. Why are they separated? There may be some danger in this space. It's safer to explore together, Duan Jipeng said in surprise. Old Man Anshi said with an ugly expression, Guanyihan and Gong Xuequan just want to get rid of us. They're both cunning and astute. Now that they've confirmed the existence of the ruins, do you think they'll share the ruins with us? This is too much, Liang said with a frown. Zhuowen said coolly, it's just human nature. We're just using each other. We're using their power to intimidate the ghost child, and they're relying on us to find this place. We don't owe each other anything. Ziyang and Luo Ye were still indignant, but seeing that Zhuowen did not say anything, they could only let it go. Moreover, without them, it's easier for us to move, Zhuowen said with a faint smile. Zhuo Xiaoyu, why do you say that? Old Man Anshi asked in surprise. Do you still remember that I got part of the ferryman's memory? Zhuowen asked. Old Man Anshi's pupils shrank. Then, he asked in surprise, you mean, the ferryman's memory has something to do with this place? Zhuowen smiled and said, yes, although it's not a complete memory, I can already determine a few locations. There will definitely be something there. Let's go to those locations first. Old Man Anshi and the others were overjoyed. They followed Zhuowen and headed in one direction. About an hour later, Zhuowen and the others stopped at a piece of land that looked like a crescent moon. This piece of land was extremely vast. There were many ruins of buildings, grasslands, mountains, and other complete terrains. In this piece of land, the most eye-catching thing was a huge stone sword stuck in the center of the land. Near the stone sword, there were many divine swords stuck in the ground. However, these divine swords were dim and had no aura.